Together, we will make America great again.
RPN is not responsible for the views, actions, statements, or opinions of its guests, advertisers, or even its viewers. The information contained in this program is not to be confused with medical or legal advice. An appearance on this platform is not necessarily an endorsement, but as always, we encourage you to do your own research. Enjoy the show. Good evening, everyone. And of course, welcome back. Yes, to another very exciting episode of Red Pill News Live. Hope you guys are having a great day. I know that I am. We got a lot of cool stuff to discuss. And yes, we are going to be exposing Jocelyn Benson, Democratic gubernatorial candidate for the state of Michigan, current Secretary of State in the state of Michigan, and the former CEO of the SPLC. Isn't that interesting? We're going to be taking a look at some of the history of the SPLC, some of their past psyops as well. We're going to be talking about efforts to curtail and also the efforts to increase immigration here in the United States. President Trump making a pretty strong statement. We're going to be exposing Gavin Newsom in California. And we've got yet another deceased nuclear NASA scientist. My goodness. The volume is low. Okay, well, which volume is low? My volume or the volume for the music? Because in order to get my stream to work properly, I had to use a different streaming service. So listen, sit back, relax, and grab your popcorn, because we're going to be right back after this. Recently, the U.S. Department of Energy announced $2.7 billion in contracts to restore domestic uranium enrichment capabilities. This isn't just government spending, it's a declaration of intent, because America needs uranium, domestic uranium, and it needs it now. So here's the reality. The U.S. consumes over 50 million pounds of uranium every single year, but we produce less than 1 million pounds domestically. Obviously, that leaves America 98% dependent on foreign suppliers for our supply. It's a critical vulnerability for national security, power generation, and advanced weapon systems. With Russia controlling much of the global enrichment capacity and escalating tensions in Iran threatening nuclear supply, the stakes could not be higher, which is why the White House has made it crystal clear. America must develop its own supply chain. And this is where Kirkstone Metals comes in. They trade under KSM in Canada and KSMCF in the US. They've got decades of uranium and junior mining expertise, and Kirkstone's leadership team knows how to turn exploration projects into real value. But the question is, can they do it again? Kirkstone controls two 100% owned uranium projects strategically located in the Athabasca Basin. This is the richest uranium district on the planet. Same area, same world-class neighborhood, and at their flagship Key Lake project, drilling has already hit high-grade uranium right near the surface, but the team truly believes the real prize lies deep underground. So using a playbook based on the decade's biggest discoveries, they're hunting the massive source below. So let's talk about the Athabasca Basin. It's home to multi-billion-dollar names like NextGen Energy and Denison Mines, but the real upside, it's often the junior explorers that are operating right next door. The Athabasca Basin has delivered over 20% of the world's uranium discoveries, with an estimated $200 to $300 billion worth of uranium identified in the ground. And yet Kirkstone is still sitting at a market cap below $12 million. That's an enormous disconnect between what's found in this district and how some companies are valued today. On January 14th, the U.S. administration reinforced their commitment to domestic energy security, invoking Section 232 via an executive order. It's a formal declaration of resource independence, and it goes beyond support. It's a mandate. Energy security is now national security, and the U.S. government is deploying its full fiscal and regulatory tools to secure the nuclear fuel cycle in North America. Kirkstone Metals, trading as KSMCF in the U.S. and KSM in Canada, is strategically positioned to capitalize on this shift. Now, uranium prices have surged, and some analysts project prices could exceed $100 per pound by 2026 as demand outpaces supply. Federal momentum has already begun to translate into dollars on the ground, including billions in planned funding for domestic uranium enrichment capacity. The sector is entering one of its most active drilling seasons in years, and with its flagship drill program approved, Kirkstone has exploration underway, and they're advancing with a focus on execution. Some companies operating in the district are valued at over $10 billion, and with the U.S. pushing for domestic uranium, Kirkstone could potentially become a leading beneficiary of the reshoring mandate. So if you want to learn more about this critical mineral story and about a team that has delivered big results in the past, check out the link in the description. And a very special thanks to Kirkstone Metals for making today's video possible. All right, and welcome back. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Let me just say at the top of the show, if the volume is low, you can always turn it up on your end. And that's all I'm going to say about that. Please do me a favor and try to use the button on the side of your phone or on your remote, because that's the easiest way to adjust it for your preferred volume. We are going to begin today by checking in on a story that I told you about last week, the unfortunate incident where an IDF soldier destroyed a crucifix in Lebanon. Well, the good news is, first of all, yesterday, the IDF put an announcement out that the 2 soldiers who were involved are going to prison, albeit only for 30 days. But then they put out a fake picture claiming that they had replaced the crucifix. It was not the same crucifix. It was different, and some people have identified that that picture was likely created with AI because there were extra trees in the background. The good news, however, is that Italian forces in Debil, Lebanon, have actually replaced the crucifix of Jesus Christ that was destroyed by the IDF soldiers with a virtually one-for-one copy. Take a look.
يسوع أنت إلهي حبك شافي الوحيد أنت حبيب نفسي أبدا يسوع أنت من أريد.
All right, so excellent news there. Now, we're going to really get into the theme of the show. I'm going to want you guys to keep this first tweet in your mind as we move through the stories that I put together for you today. This is Tony Saruga. He's a great follow, but he brings up something that's been around for a long time. It's called the Cloward-Piven strategy. Now, this is a political strategy. It's been around since the mid-'60s, and it was created by some American sociologists and political activists by the name of Richard Cloward and Francis Fox Piven. So it's quite literally a strategy to change a nation by forcing political change to societal collapse through orchestrated crises. So the Cloward-Piven strategy seeks to essentially hasten the fall of capitalism by overloading the government bureaucracy with a flood of impossible demands, amassing massive unpayable national debt, and other methods like unfettered immigration, which will then, of course, push society into crisis and ultimately economic collapse. That ought to sound pretty familiar to you if you've been paying attention for any real length of time, because that, my friends, is exactly what we've seen here in the United States. Now, I want to move from that into another facet of that plan, which is ultimately the complete and permanent takeover of the American bureaucratic class and the political world. Now, after the events of the election in Virginia the other night, Tony is a data scientist, and he and his partners, they have access to a bunch of tools where they essentially can use publicly available data to identify the movements and locations of particular people. And if you know someone's device ID, if you know what their phone number is, if you know what phone they're going to be using, then you can quite literally track their movements all around the country, because every single time they ping off a cell tower, they're going to be found and they're going to be seen in a particular location. So I guess it turns out that Barack Hussein Obama and a group of other people were on a Zoom meeting, a sort of a planning session after the Virginia election results were released. Now, along with Barack Obama was a mix of mega donors, people who are funding super PACs, political action committees, people who are funding some of these big races all around the country, essentially a lot of very powerful people. These are the people who within the political establishment are going to be shaping endorsements, who are going to be setting strategy, as well as a group of political consultants who have a track record for being able to push a candidate to the front of the pack and getting them the visibility that is needed by the candidate to convince the public to elect them. Now, I don't know if Tony actually gained access to this call, but he says during the meeting, Barack Hussein Obama promised Democrat leaders a permanent majority in 2029, and he assured them that Mitch McConnell's chief of staff, Terry Carmack, had already told him the Save America Act was dead. Now, also present was George Soros, and including his son, Alex, some other powerful people with names like Michael Bloomberg, Bill Gates, Laurene Powell Jobs, James Clyburn, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, Liz Smith, Rebecca Katz, Norm Eisen, Mark Elias, and a series of partners from Covington and Burling, the deep state's favorite legal firm. Wilmer Hale as well, Paul Weiss, Rifkind, Wharton, and Garrison. So a whole host of who's who in Democrat Party politics. Now, the really interesting thing about the announcement that Tony made is that, of course, it came hot on the heels of us learning that a court in Virginia has just recently blocked the actual election that took place 2 days ago. I want to give you a couple of other pieces of data when we're looking at just how easy it was for them to steal the results of this election. Virginia is one of those states that the Department of Justice is currently trying to get their hands on their voter registration rolls so that they can clear them up. In Virginia, they do have a problem with voters on the rolls. In fact, they have over 1 million duplicate voter registrations, 1,074,543, and that's according to Virginia's own numbers. So, of course, they're well aware of this, and they've done absolutely nothing to clear these people off the voter rolls, because why would they? I mean, they need them on the voter rolls so that when the time comes, they can go ahead and use those extra ballots to pump up the vote totals. Now, since yesterday we only just briefly spoke about the fact that this Virginia court had struck down this gerrymandering referendum, I thought that we would take a look at exactly what the court said. So, this is the Tazewell Circuit Court, and they've ruled that this redistricting referendum was unconstitutional. So the injunction blocking the certification of this very narrow yes victory has essentially denied the Democrats their ability to redistrict the state. And the judge also denied a request from the Democrats to stay the decision pending appeal. So the decision, the block, goes into effect immediately. This was announced yesterday afternoon by former Virginia Attorney General Ken Cuccinelli, which is where I brought you the news from. He's currently leading the Election Transparency Initiative in the state of Virginia. He said, update on the referendum lawsuits. The Tazewell Circuit Court just ruled the referendum is unconstitutional. The judge ordered an injunction blocking certification of the election and denied a motion to stay pending the appeal. A final order will be entered once drafted and it will be immediately appealed by the people who are hoping to get this gerrymander off the ground. So the ruling basically says that this is an unconstitutional attempt to redistrict the state, and it never should have been allowed in the first place. And as we saw yesterday, the timeline on which the Democrats were attempting to push this through also never should have happened because they were outside of their own rules. And, of course, this map, if successfully allowed to be redistricted, would take the majority of the power out of the hands of the majority of the people in the state. I don't know that I actually read this on the air, but this is just to show you guys how confusing the question was that they asked on the ballot. Should the Constitution of Virginia be amended to allow the General Assembly to temporarily adopt new congressional districts to restore fairness in the upcoming elections while ensuring Virginia's standard redistricting process resumes for all future redistricting after the 2030 census? And, of course, anybody who read that said, well, geez, you know, what the hell are they even asking there? It sounds really deceptive. Right now, Virginia is operating under pretty much one of the fairest congressional maps in the nation. It's drawn by an independent and bipartisan commission, and it was actually already approved by voters back in 2020. So the fact that Virginia is attempting to enter into this redistricting effort right now, it's a clear and partisan attempt to take over control of power in the state. And of course, once they gain that power, just as Barack Obama said in that post-election call, that power would be permanent. There would be nothing that anybody else would ever be able to do because the entire state would be controlled by Democrats. And as we've seen in so many instances, the Democrats seem to be willing to play as dirty as they need to play for keeps. And the Republicans, oftentimes, they just seem to go right along with it. So very good news there. But in addition to that, taking a deeper look at some of the numbers, yesterday we talked about two different ballot dumps, tens of thousands of ballots, all for yes, that were dropped at two separate times. Well, the Lone Raccoon on X has actually a graph for us to look at, and you can see the three characteristic F curves which all occurred in Fairfax County, which all equal tens of thousands of yes votes. And all day long, you can see in the orange line, the yes vote was losing. Very slowly over the course of the day, it got closer. There seems to be a couple of different ballot dumps in different areas throughout the day. But it wasn't until right here where we see the ballot dump come up, and it essentially goes equal with the no votes, still below the no votes. So then they need another ballot dump to push it just over the top. And the entirety of this line from that point forward seems to move in tandem. The yes votes, after they're pushed over the top, seem to be tracking directly along with the no votes. If there is a no vote, there's also a yes vote. So there's no ability for those no votes to take over at any point. So he says there was an F curve at 8:59 p.m. that was actually preceded by a near F curve at 8:43. These two updates wiped away what would have been a decent lead for no redistricting. And then interestingly, at 9:16, we've got another big jump for yes. From my analysis, most of these votes from all three came from Fairfax County. This is one of Virginia's most reliable vote manufacturing hubs. My old pet peeve, totals going up rather than going down rather than up, was way too frequent. You had 23 counties who had at least one case of negative votes. That includes Chesterfield County, with a whopping 71,903 votes being deducted at 10:45 this morning on April 22nd. Augusta had an 11,968 deduction at 10:18. A whopping 13 counties all had deductions in the same report at 7:41 p.m. on the 21st, which makes a total of 18,476 votes. This is obviously not acceptable. There is no rational explanation for this unless someone with control over the votes was actually taking those no votes back and simply erasing them. And of course, the referendum ultimately lost because of mail-in votes. Mail-in votes coming in at different times during the day allowed for those spikes, those F curves, to dump tens of thousands of yes votes in. And of course, there's no world where that would ever happen either. You're not going to get a batch of mail-in ballots that are organic, that are all comprised of votes for yes in terms of gerrymandering. You're going to have some anomalies in there. Even if you have most yes votes, you're still going to have a significant number of no votes. So we had about 10% of the total ballots being made of mail-ins. About 73% of those mail-ins were yes votes. So we have no way of knowing how many of those were real people casting real votes for themselves. I would suggest probably vast majority of them were not, especially considering the fact that I just told you they've got over 1 million duplicate registrations. So that's at least 1 million votes that they could have pulled from. And the no and yes votes were roughly about 1.5 million apiece. Now, we have no way of knowing if those people were real, but they added a net 137,000 votes for yes, and that is almost 50,000 more than the currently reported winning margin for yes. In summary, a completely preventable train wreck. I hope the Republican leaders in Virginia are now convinced that mail-in ballots and machine counting are not our friends, and I also hope they start asking the hard questions of counties like Chesterfield. Now, let's take a look also right here from the Lonely Raccoon. And we can see in all of the other counties in Virginia, you also have decreases in vote tallies. So you have votes being deducted, and these are the ones that he was talking about, most of them happening at 7:41 p.m. Now, it's maybe a couple of hundred votes per county. Sometimes it's as little as 3. Sometimes it's as many as 11,000. But it is a significant number of votes when you put them all together. There is no organic explanation for votes being deducted after they have been tallied. So I don't think it's going to be that long before the Department of Justice steps in and says, you know what? We are going to take a much harder look at what's actually happening in Virginia. Kind of looks to me like the Democrats stepped into a big pile of horse shit with this election. It's quite obvious what they're attempting to do there. But the DOJ is also doing that type of granular investigation in Wayne County, Michigan, a place where, I know from my personal experience of living in Michigan and all of the reporting that we've done over the years, that Wayne County has a significant amount of fraud going on. So the Michigan Republican Party is fully supporting the Department of Justice's demand to review over 865,000 ballots and election records from Wayne County. The DOJ just issued a 14-day deadline for the city of Detroit and Wayne County officials. They've got officially 2 weeks in which they can diddle around before they have to hand over all those ballots, all the receipts, all the envelopes, and this will all be related to the 2024 federal election. Now, why are they asking for this? Well, there is, as I have suggested, a history of allegations and mounting evidence that shows there is a major problem in Wayne County with election integrity. Now, the Democrat governor, Gretchen Whitmer, Stretching Gretchen, some call her, and the Democrat Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson, who we're going to talk about later, and the Democrat Attorney General, Dana Nessel, have all publicly resisted the effort. They're even threatening to just simply not comply with the order. But it is Harmeet Dillon that is leading this this crusade here. We can see in the letter dated from April 14th, so we're coming up on just about 5 days now before they have to hand over all of those ballots. But they are writing to the chief election officer for Wayne County concerning election records in your possession. And of course, this is pursuant to the Civil Rights Act of 1960, as well as the Help America Vote Act, I'm sure. So they have requested that all of this information be handed over. They are authorized to investigate and prosecute individuals who may have registered to vote or voted in violation of 52 U.S.C. 10307 and 20511, as well as 18 U.S.C. 611 and 1015. They want, among other things, voting registration records, polls, lists, applications for absentee ballots, ballot envelopes, tally sheets, computer programs used to tabulate votes. That's very interesting. This is the first time that I've seen them actually requesting a hard copy of the software that they're using to tabulate this stuff, as well as the ballots themselves. Now, in recent years, they say there's been a number of recorded allegations as well as convictions in Wayne County related to election fraud. And then they go through and they list several of them. And then, in addition, in 2020, Wayne County and the city of Detroit were sued based on allegations of election-related fraud. And then they go through a list of those as well. They also cite the relevant court documents. Based on this history of fraud, convictions, and other allegations concerning the election procedures in Wayne County, for the purpose of ensuring that the foregoing federal election laws are not violated in November of 2024, we are requesting that you produce all of that election-related material, and we need it within 14 days. So that is pretty cool there. And you can expect that we'll be hearing more about that in the very near future. Now, I'd like to go back to what Barack Obama said on that call, suggesting that Democrats were going to have a permanent majority, where he mentioned that the chief of staff for soon-to-be retired Senator Mitch McConnell has suggested that the Save America Act is dead. Well, a Republican senator speaking to Punchbowl News might be John Thune, because John Thune seems to have a personal office for Punchbowl News right there on Capitol Hill. Mike Lee says that he was told that an anonymous senator speaking to Punchbowl News has also said that the Save America Act is dead. Well, Mike's got some other ideas about it.
Supposedly, one of my colleagues called the effort to pass the Save America Act in the Senate a charade. Well, my guess is that whoever said that but didn't have the guts to put their name to it is somebody who's a co-sponsor of the Save America Act, who openly, actively tells his constituents that he's a co-sponsor of the Save America Act, and maybe even tells donors that in order to raise funds. Regardless, this isn't going away. I'm not going away. This thing's not a charade. And I'm doubling down on this. I'm going to work twice as hard just because you said that, whoever you are, supposedly.
Now, last night, Senator Kennedy also put forth a number of resolutions to have them passed through the reconciliation process, and that included elements of the Save America Act. I don't think that that is going to be successful. Some of the other things that he put forth might be, because they can directly be related to the budget. But as long as we've got people that continue to fight for this, I think that we can't say that it's dead. Now, I did want to bring you guys some information about my home state of Florida in case anybody's thinking about moving down here. We have passed our own version of the Save America Act. And as part of the Save America Act, if you are running for public office in the state of Florida, on the new candidate forms, there is a new box that you must check. If you are running for state office, or for public office rather, and you also happen to be a dual citizen, you now have to make that known on your declaration when you're running for office. And guess what? The people who would otherwise be voting for you are now going to be informed about the fact that you hold dual allegiance. Now, Anna Paulina Luna says, I've said this before and I'll say it again, you cannot have loyalty to two countries, only the United States of America. Thank you to Ron DeSantis for getting this done. Now, Ron had mentioned it right here because Anna had said individuals should be required to disclose whether or not they are dual citizens when they file to run for office. You can't be loyal to two countries, only America. Ron DeSantis should consider adding this to the Florida candidate disclosure forms. And he says, good news, this has already been done in our recently signed Save Florida Act. So very, very good. Very good news. What's really interesting to me is that there's also a federal version of this that's been put forth, and it's actually by Randy Fine. He is my congressman. He's my House representative down here. I don't particularly like Randy Fine. I don't really like his attitude. I don't like a lot of the stuff that he's done. He's good on some things. And this is not one of those things that I expected I was going to, congratulate him on putting forth. But it is something that needs to be done. So we're going to be keeping an eye on that as well. Doc from Amish PA says, my based Italian brothers got me crying. Yes, I'm with you, homie. Will to Push Forward says, Zach, there are conservatives in Canada who decided to switch side to liberal, giving liberals the majority. Looks like Dems are trying to do the same thing in the U.S. by stopping the Save America Act. It's coordinated. So if you had conservatives who switched to the liberals, they were never conservatives. So I'm not aware of any conservatives that are going to switch to Democrat here. I think that those people just pretend to be Republicans, and then they stop things like the Save America Act from passing. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's obvious that there is coordination. The name Republican means pretty much literally nothing to me at this point. The only thing that matters to me is somebody's voting record and their character. So I pay more attention to that than I do to what somebody's declared political allegiance is, because I think we've all seen it over and over again. Quite often it means very little. You know, I mean, most people, when you say the name John Thune, you know, well, he's not really a Republican, he's a rhino, you know, but there are so many of those people in Washington, D.C. They call themselves a Republican, but do they really share our values? Do they really share our political ideology? Oftentimes the answer is no. Those people are simply looking to capitalize on your fear that a Democrat might get into office. Oh my gosh, I better vote for the established candidate because I wouldn't want a Democrat to win. I mean, are they going to be that much worse than the Republican? Yeah, probably. But the Republican oftentimes is going to be pretty freaking bad too, which is one of the reasons why I like it when upstart candidates come out and then primary those people who are not good. Sean Joe, thank you for the can. Filter Dog says, well, he's got a tweet. I'll go ahead and pull that up in a second. Mischief, is that, no, Miskeel? Miskeel? Thank you for the cookie. Moon Baby says, what up, Famalam? Good to see you. Trump won. Thank you for the cookie as well. All right, now, we'll pull up Filter Dog's tweet in just a second. But first, I wanted to go over this post that President Trump had shared on Truth Social. A lot of people are attributing the words to President Trump, but it's actually a passage from a show that I believe it was, oh, God, is it Michael Steele? Hold on just a second. It's not Michael Steele. It's, I can't remember his name. I can't freaking remember his name. Anyways, let's go ahead and look at the post. So essentially, it's a post about birthright citizen. Oh, Michael Savage. There we go. So it's a post about birthright citizenship. And Michael Savage is talking about how at one time, you know, he used to support Indian Americans, okay? And he supported people coming to the United States from India. But now he's really come to understand why it's so important that we simply just don't open the doors to every single person that wants to come in here. Just because somebody says that they have training and they're going to, you know, add to the United States of America does not mean that they're going to. And obviously, like I told you this week, about 10% of American births being due to anchor babies. We have a real problem with birthright citizenship. We have a problem with illegal aliens coming to the United States of America. I was talking to my friend before the show, you know, and he was talking about, you know, I can't believe that they're cutting welfare for poor people. I can't believe that they're giving all of these tax breaks to the wealthy. I actually want to read to you guys what I wrote to him because he did not know any of the stuff that I was telling him. He was upset with Dr. Oz. And I said, why are you upset with Dr. Oz? And he said, well, cutting food stamps for poor people. And I was like, well, that's a function of HHS. So Dr. Oz didn't have anything to do with that. And then he said, okay, so what about all these rich bastards that get so many tax breaks? I don't see any problem with giving anyone that makes $150,000 a year or less $200 a month in food stamps. I mean, that's not going to feed somebody for a whole month. America makes the most food in the entire world. We shouldn't have hungry people here. I agree. But the answer is not simply to just give money to people. The answer is cutting off the flow of illegal immigrants and also stemming the flow of legal immigrants coming into the United States. So I said, no, you're right. We shouldn't. But the states have been giving billions to illegal aliens. That's the reason that money and resources have been unavailable to the less fortunate here in the United States. Like I told you guys this week, 60% of the rental and housing market was driven by illegal aliens during the Biden administration. That means that American citizens were unable to get a place to live. And then, of course, every single one of those people who are driving the rental and housing market, they're taking a job from an American citizen. Those people that were taking all of that housing, they come here and they get everything for free. They get paid under the table. They take opportunities from American citizens. So the narrative about taxes being not charged to the rich is total bullshit. This administration has significantly reduced the tax burden on lower and middle income people. And listen to this. When somebody tells you, oh, we got to tax the rich, or the rich don't pay their fair share, the top 1% of America pays 25% of taxes. The top 50% pays 97% of the taxes, while the bottom 50% pays 2% of the taxes. Most poor people are not even paying taxes. Under Joe Biden, income taxes went up by $500 billion, 28% higher than they were under Donald Trump's first term. The average person was paying 15% more every single year, so no, the rich are not actually getting away without paying. And then, of course, I told him about the birth rate and how anchor babies are stealing from Americans. That's taking money directly out of Americans' pockets. Every single one of those anchor babies automatically gets qualified for WIC and food stamps and Section 8 and cash benefit welfare. And then those illegal aliens get to bring their family members in. And then, of course, they take more jobs from American citizens. The more money we're spending on people who are not citizens of this country means the less money we have to help out people that are citizens who are truly in need. And right now, we've talked on many different occasions about the overuse of visa programs to bring in cheap labor to steal work from American citizens. And it's a wonderful thing that President Trump is posting this because it shows that he's thinking about it, and all of the changes that he's made to the various visa programs. It also demonstrates that he knows that Americans can't work if we aren't given the opportunities, if we don't have the ability to even go to a job. ZBM says, we have a rhino issue here in Idaho. Our governor only got my vote last year because the ballot had multiple Republicans running against one Democrat. Pretty strategic, in my opinion. Vote for Fitzpatrick, Idahoans. All right. Now, speaking of illegals and legal immigrants, Representative Salazar is still out there having bad takes on her Dignidad Act. Now, she was bragging about why this will be good, and she said that the sole purpose of the Dignity Act is intended to deliver cheap labor to all sectors of the economy. Oh, that sounds great. You're going to just allow all of these people who are here illegally, give them an opportunity to take on a job at something lower than what an American would do. So then what about all of the Americans who otherwise would be working in those positions? Of course, they're going to be shit out of luck. Now, she said in a recent press briefing, when people tell me that I am trying to help big business to have cheap labor, I'm going to answer to them, it's not just big business. It's not only agricultural or construction or hospitality, or care, or manufacturing. It's more, she said. Who else? The farmers, people in the dairy business. We all like milk, right? Well, there are 150,000 jobs available in agriculture right now. Manufacturers. I don't know anyone in the manufacturing world, but I do know that the National Association of Manufacturers decided to do a press conference to support the Dignidad Act. It's agricultural, construction, hospitality. So these imported workers supply cheap products, which, of course, then we won't be able to afford to buy because we won't actually have a job. But Maria Salazar doesn't understand that. She says Americans want affordability, and they want affordable fruits and vegetables. Well, you know what is really affordable fruits and vegetables, guys? When you have your own garden, when you grow your own fruits and vegetables. If you grow your own food, you're not paying for anything but the water. And guess what? You can collect that from the sky. God provides everything that you need. They want to keep you hooked on cheap labor. They want to keep you hooked on cheap products, on bad quality products. Think about all of the different times that they've come out with alerts. Don't eat strawberries because somebody with tuberculosis was working in the field and they got their tuberculosis all over everything. Or maybe they were taking a dump in the field and they got cholera all over the strawberries. Well, that's not too cheap when they've got to take that stuff, recall it, and then destroy it. Now, her bill, make no mistake, is going to flood the U.S. labor market because it's going to grant massive amnesty to people all around the country, tens of millions of illegal aliens. It's going to block deportations. It would provide work permit amnesty to pretty much everybody who's here. It would stop returning. It would return to the country people who have already been deported, and it would also expand the flood of migrant workers. Now, there is a process for migrant workers to come into this country. And if a manufacturer or if a farmer, if a family farm, if they want to use migrant labor, like there's a process to go about that. But just like illegal aliens that want to come here without paying, they want to just show up and tell us that we ought to provide them a place to stay. If a business is not willing to go about it properly, they're just trying to cut corners so that they can make an extra buck. They want to put some more money in their pocket. But the bill does not include any useful cuts in the huge inflow of roughly 1 million legalized migrants per year. Those people are still going to be coming, and even more of them are going to come in because Maria Salazar makes it possible with the Dignidad Act. Now, I realize that this is not going to be passed. Even if by some grace of their God, they're able to push it through the House and then also push it through the Senate, President Trump is not going to sign it. He will veto it. But I feel it's vital to continue exposing these people because we need to know who does not have the best interest of American citizens at heart. Now, I'll give you another reason why we can't afford to continue allowing these people to come into this country. Perfect example of the Cloward-Piven strategy. Under the Biden regime, the cost of educating illegal aliens reached $80 billion a year. And guess who pays for that? Guess why taxes went up $500 billion during the Biden regime? Because of President Trump and his strong immigration policies, the enrollment of these migrants, these illegal aliens at American schools is plummeting. You know what happens when you don't have a bunch of non-English speaking foreigners that are clogging up your classroom? You can have a classroom that is smaller, which is going to give your children a more personalized look at education. If a kid has a question, they no longer have to feel like they're a burden because they need to pull the teacher or the teacher's aide away from the group of unruly South American migrant children who are dicking off in the corner. So this is a study that came out from 2023. And you can see here, this is, it's from the Federation for American Immigration Reform. And the entire total of educational expenses is broken down like this. You got primary and secondary education, that's about $3 billion. You've got limited English proficiency teaching, that's about $580 million. Paying for migrant schooling, about $239 million. Head Start, which is basically, pre-kindergarten, that's $2.7 billion, so a total is $6.6 billion. And then total state, that was federal. And then total state expenditures, you got about $70 billion for K through 12. And then post-secondary tuition losses and financial aid, that financial aid that would otherwise go to American children, is about $2.7 billion. So all told, you're looking at about $73 billion every single year that goes to fund these people who have no legal claim on this land. In Utah, educating illegals costs the state's taxpayers more than $650 million every single year. And looking at 2023 here, lawmakers were forced to deploy emergency funding to keep up with the strain these illegals were putting on the public school system. This school year, Utah's K through 12 public schools saw the largest decrease in enrollment in 25 years, which state superintendents attributed to, in large part, slowing in migration, which is wonderful. In Florida, down here, we are charged about $4 billion a year to educate these illegals. And this school year, the number of foreign students that entered Miami-Dade public schools fell by more than 80%. In New York, educating illegals costs the citizens of the state more than $4.6 billion. In New York City, the 60 schools that took the largest share of migrants under Biden saw those gains nearly erased this past school year. Same in Colorado. Educating illegals costs about $2 billion a year. And in 2024, Denver Public Schools was forced to allocate an additional $1.6 million so that they could accommodate all of these late arrivals illegals that were showing up, primarily the children of Venezuelan aliens. And this school year, Denver Public Schools saw a greater than 70% dip in migrant students. In Massachusetts, you're looking at about $1.6 billion a year. For 2025, the number of English learners enrolled in Massachusetts public schools fell by 7,000 aliens. In Washington, D.C., it costs about $200 million. Well, this year, enrollment at schools with large migrant populations and expensive English language programs is down by about 25%. Finally, California. Educating illegal aliens in California is about $20 billion a year. This year, the Los Angeles Unified School District saw more than 20% less newcomers, aliens, than they did in 2023. And Inglewood Unified School District saw a drop of more than 72%. So this is big, big money, and it is also big, big bad for the United States of America. So the fact that President Trump has successfully been able to stem that flow, and starting at the baseline, because those kids grow up to become adults, obviously, it's going to put us in a much, much better position. All right, now, speaking of California, there was a federal raid in Orange County earlier this morning. 30 alleged gang members who have ties to a Mexican mafia were taken down in a series of pre-dawn raids. They called it Operation Gangsters Paradise. And the gang is known as La M. They are a violent prison-based gang of gangs who controls almost all Hispanic street gangs in the state of California. So the daring series of arrests were targeting alleged murderers, drug dealers, racketeers, all taken in by agents with the FBI from a series of residences in and around the city of Santa Ana. Now, these pre-dawn raids have been going on over the past few weeks, and the 18th Street Super Gang was previously taken down by the FBI last month. This morning, we executed Operation Gangsters Paradise. We've indicted 40 members and associates of the Mexican Mafia. They are the most powerful, prolific gang that operates out of state prisons. That's Bill Asaley, the U.S. attorney for the L.A. district. They control and operate all Hispanic street gangs out of the neighborhoods. Federal agents working with local police arrested suspects, confiscated firearms, seized illegal drugs. They conducted 30 raids, mostly in Orange County. And you can see here in the photographs on screen, you've got the Mexican gangbangers walking backwards towards the feds. They're driving around in armored vehicles. They are all kitted out. You've got another 10 indictments for members of this Mexican mafia crew who are already in state prison. And the fatigues and the assault weapons and battering rams that the officers used to take down these people included the residence of Andrew Speedy Hernandez, who was wanted on charges of drug trafficking. When they arrived at the bungalow home of Hernandez in Lakewood, the agents detonated a flashbang, announced themselves, and said, "Hey, drug dealer, come on out." So he and an associate came out of the bungalow. They cuffed him, took him into custody, and then they went about their business, doing more and more raids. Now, because this mafia operates from behind bars, they obviously have access to quite a few tools and no shortage of members as well. So they enforce taxes on the sale of illicit drugs. They've got protection rackets. Obviously, they engage in human trafficking, but a lot more. But once they get out of prison, they essentially are the street gang leadership, the government of the street gangs. directing which crews operate out of where, and also, of course, dealing out punishments when people step out of line. So this mafia serves as a go-between for the Mexican drug cartels and then these narco super gangs, which are the ones who distribute the products from the cartels, not only in California, but beyond. Primarily in California, it's this prison gang, and then you've got the 18th Street gang, you've got MS-13, and the M in Mexican Mafia happens to be the 13th letter of the alphabet, so that's got something there. So they have all these sub-gangs under the larger gang. You've got Puente 13, Venice 13, Florencia 13. They deal drugs. They extort people for money. They commit acts of violence, and a lot of it is done at the behest of people who are in prison. Well, they're not going to be doing it much more after this because they're all getting arrested and they'll be going to prison as well. Hopefully, they'll be going to prison for a very long time and we can get them the hell out of this country. Now, before we continue, I do have a brief message from our friends over here on Rumble. All right, you guys. You're all aware, banks are not your friends. They can cancel your accounts. They can freeze your cards. They can decide what you're allowed to buy, what you're allowed to say, who you're allowed to support, because big banks and financial institutions have got total control over your money, and they know it. They use it. This is why financial independence is so vitally important right now more than ever. So introducing the Rumble Wallet. It's a wallet built for real freedom. When you use Rumble Wallet, you take control over your own money. A bank doesn't control it. No governments, no tech companies. You can buy digital assets like Tether, Tether Gold, and Bitcoin all in one secure place. There's no permission, no middlemen, no cancel button. So when you want to support creators like myself or others that you actually believe in, you can use that Rumble Wallet app to directly tip the creators securely, instantly, and without any interference. There is no credit card or credit line they can shut off. It is your wallet permanently to protect for the future and your family. So when the system fails and institutions turn on their own people, financial sovereignty ends up being the only difference between security and vulnerability. And don't forget, doesn't matter who you vote for. Rumble Wallet isn't about politics. It's about freedom, ownership, and protecting what's yours. So take control today. Download the Rumble Wallet now and step away from the big banks for good, and you'll get true ownership, true protection, and true financial freedom. You can go to wallet.rumble.com. You can go to that QR code that you see on screen, or you can just download it directly from the App Store on your phone. Thank you so much to Rumble, and thank you to everybody here watching. Oh, gosh, I almost forgot. We have to pull up the tweet that Filter Dog had dropped. Let's go ahead and see what my man has in store for us. Okay, so update on Virginia. Since I posted dates yesterday going backwards, we've got quite a few more. I've decided to post the following list, sorted in numbers of 10. And again, you can see here, wow, in Chesterfield County alone, you had negative 71,903 votes. That is absolutely insane. So yes, it is exactly the same phenomenon that we see time and time again. And you know what? I'm going to go ahead and follow the lone raccoon. All right, now, I really, really like Eli Crane. I think Eli Crane's a good dude. He's put forth a bill that would pause the issuance of H-1B visas for 3 years. That way, we can perform an accounting of the program. We can reform the program. And then when it resumes, it will be essentially a much leaner, meaner device. The only caveat that I have here is that H-1Bs are not the only visas. As we've established here on the program, there are a number of different visa programs. And now that there's been restrictions put on H-1Bs, people are starting to exploit these other ones, such as the opt visa and stuff like that. So this was a proposal that was introduced yesterday by Representative Crane. And it would amend the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952. It would bring the H-1B program back from hiatus with a series of dramatic changes so that they can aid to protect American workers better. It would also rotate the current crop of visa holders out of the U.S. during the pause. So if they do hold a visa, they would have to go back. So the cap on visas would be reduced. Right now, it's 65,000. It would bring that number down to 25,000. So truly, if you're going to be coming here and spending $100,000, we're going to have a little bit of an easier time determining, who really deserves it. So the existing exemptions to the cap would also be eliminated, and the allowance of 2 3-year visa terms would then get reduced down to only 1. The people who apply for these visas would be required to have a foreign residence so that they would be able to go back to their old home. It also would show that they intend to go back, that they're not coming here on an H-1B and attempting to just stick around forever. Employers would also face much stricter guidelines. So companies that are seeking to import these H-1B visa holders would be required to attest that they're unable to find a qualified American worker for that position. Right now, even though they are supposed to be offering those jobs to Americans, oftentimes they don't. They just go straight to these foreign workers. And that would bring in foreigners that would not adversely affect American workers. And they also have to attest to the fact that they haven't laid off American workers in the previous year, and that they're not going to lay off any workers in the next year. It would also increase the fee on H-1B visas. It would be at least $200,000 a year. So the only people that are going to be brought in on H-1B visas would be people who are going to make these companies a lot of money. If it passes, the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services would then be required to distribute H-1B visas according to the highest wages offered, as opposed to a lottery system. So H-1B visa workers would also be barred from being employed by more than one company at a time. Third-party employers, staffing agencies, they would all be barred from being able to employ them. That's a huge thing right there, because right now there are a lot of staffing agencies whose entire business model is built around farming out these H-1B visas and other visas as well. In addition, visa holders, it would include not just H-1Bs, but also H-2A, which is agricultural workers, and then H-2B seasonal workers, would be banned from bringing their relatives to the U.S. with them. And the federal government would no longer be able to sponsor or employ non-immigrant workers. Now, once these people get to the U.S., non-immigrant workers would be prohibited from changing their immigration status to another without leaving the country first. If they do want to change, they want to get a different visa, they've got to go home, they've got to reapply. That would prevent H-1B workers from cheating the system by switching to a student or a tourist visa. And the co-sponsors for this bill include Representatives Brian Babin of Texas, Brandon Gill of Texas, Paul Gosar of Arizona, Wesley Hunt of Texas, Tom McClintock of California, Keith Self of Texas, and Andy Ogles of Tennessee. In the Senate, they've got perhaps a bill of their own that they're going to have to put together. Senator Mike Lee has recently voiced support to put a pause on the H-1B system, so perhaps he is the guy to go ahead and ask to do that. Sean Joe, thank you very much for 2 cans. No Thanks Joe says, thanks Lisa and Zach. Good Thursday to you. I must convey my true appreciation for your hard work. God bless, be safe. I love you, brother. Thanks for being here. Sean Joe, thank you for the cookie. Darla says, thank you again, Zach and Lisa, for everything you do, even when technical difficulties are a real pain. We appreciate you. I appreciate you as well. All right. And continuing on here, Darla, thank you very much. Judy the Lady Pug, thank you for the cookie. Thank you for the cookie again. Sean Joe, thank you for the cookie. Judy the Lady Pug, thank you for the cookie. Sean Joe, thank you for 2 cookies. Filter Dog says, La M.A., the gang of gangs known to control nearly every Hispanic street gang in the California region. And then Sean Joe, thank you for the cookie as well. All right. Now, we also need to make mention that the Senate has finally passed a budget resolution as part of the mission to fund DHS. So this budget resolution was finally passed early this morning. There was a 6-hour session where they discussed it. Republicans were able to finally use the reconciliation bill process to fund ICE and Border Patrol along with the rest of DHS. This allowed them to do the passage without having to worry about the 60-vote threshold. The Senate voted 50 to 48. Senators Lisa Murkowski and Rand Paul voted against it. Grassley and Warner did not vote. I guess they had some personal reasons. They weren't able to be around. The budget resolution now is obviously going to head to the House. We don't know if the House is going to pass the legislation because the people in the House already said, we're not going to pass anything until the Senate pushes through the Save America Act. Get it done, or we're not going to do anything to help you out. However, President Trump may ask them to go ahead and just take care of this. Now, John Thune, of course, says it didn't seem like this should be that heavy a lift, but nothing is easy these days. Of course, you know, they're not doing much of anything there. The chairman of the House Judiciary, Jim Jordan, who's also a budget chairman, Jody Arrington, Ways and Means chairman, Jason Smith, they've all called for expanding reconciliation bills beyond funding so that they can get everything passed through there that we need passed through. Democrats have not agreed to fund those parts of the Department of Homeland Security, which, of course, forces Republicans to put through this reconciliation bill. And finally, they were able to get it done. So the people working in DHS in these various areas, they're not going to have to worry about that any longer. All right. Thank you to Denise. She says another issue with the criminal aliens is that a lot of them send the majority of that money they earn back to their home country to help their families, so that money is not staying in the USA. Yes, that is absolutely a huge problem. All right. Now we're going to focus a little bit on California, because California has been a huge part of that Cloward-Piven strategy to overwhelm the United States. California, one of the largest states in the country, also one of the largest single locations for illegal aliens to set up shop. Gavin Newsom just got a major loss in federal appeals court. You might remember several months ago, California legislators had passed a law which banned the use of face masks for ICE agents. And it would require those same agents to wear ID badges so they could be easily identified and likely so that they could be easily tracked back to their homes. Now, the 3-judge panel on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled 2-1 that California does not have the authority to regulate federal immigration officials. It's the argument that the administration made at the outset, the supremacy clause. So the 3-judge panel included 2 Trump appointees and 1 Obama appointee. And they have said unequivocally that California overstepped their authority by trying to regulate immigration and customs enforcement agents. That marks the latest flashpoint in a broader fight between blue states and the federal government over immigration enforcement operations. And they said in the decision, we conclude that Section 10 of the No Vigilantes Act attempts to directly regulate the United States in its performance of governmental functions. The Supremacy Clause forbids the state from enforcing such legislation. I knew it was going to come out that way. There was really no other way that it possibly could. All right. Now, again, going back to the Cloward-Piven strategy, Gavin Newsom was found during his time in office to have sponsored the importation of at least 400,000 illegal aliens. Now, this is a report coming from the Manhattan Institute. And not only has Gavin Newsom allowed these hundreds of thousands of illegals to pour into his state, but he's also spent a tremendous amount of money making sure that it was going to happen. This was done primarily through the awarding of state grants. These grants, of course, would be given to non-governmental organizations and charities. Those charities would then turn around and assist these illegal aliens to come into California. And then, of course, once they come into California, they're free to leave and go anywhere else in the United States. Now, this is tax money that's been taken in by the state of California. The people of California basically paid for their own demise without their consent. Gavin Newsom spent about $1 billion importing these 400,000 extra illegal migrants. Since Newsom took office, California has granted massive contracts for migrant-related services, more than $250 million to Catholic charities, $85 million to Jewish Family Services, $12 million to Centro Legal de la Raza, $23 million to the Immigration Institute of the Bay Area, and even more. That's not a finite number there. But the funding is all in addition to California's share of the massive federal funding that was directed by Joe Biden's pro-migration border chief, Alejandro Mayorkas. Alejandro Mayorkas, of course, was behind much of this change that took place during the Biden regime as well. The state's Democratic government has also steered $110 million to a major Latino political machine called the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights Los Angeles, CHIRLA. They were deeply invested in the demonstrations that were taking place last year. They can probably be described as a one-stop activist machine. They can produce propaganda, they can engage in legal action, and of course, they get a lot of people out onto the streets. They coordinate what's called the LA Rapid Response Network. They track ICE, they track raids, and they take what they call is direct action to shut down detention centers. They also agitate on social media. Now, what's also really, really disturbing is that Gavin Newsom, as part of this effort to bring all of these illegal aliens, one of these NGOs that he sponsored is a group that explicitly specializes in bringing in illegal aliens who are HIV positive. This director of this non-governmental organization, this 501c3, claims that his queer, trans, and non-binary clients, 1 in 5 of whom is infected with AIDS, almost all gain asylum in the United States. Can you imagine, of all of the illegal aliens, of all of the people that you want to bring into the United States, you focus on bringing people who are HIV positive. Now, let me also remind you, California, not that long ago, also legalized the transmission of HIV to your sexual partner. It used to be a crime to have sex with somebody and not tell them that you might be giving them AIDS. But now it's totally cool. So Oasis Legal Services, this taxpayer-funded group, has worked on helping queer and trans immigrants navigate immigration relief and benefits. In a recent report, they boasted that the odds of winning an asylum case go up 99% for clients when they are represented by an Oasis team member. But the group denies they encourage the entry of immigrants. Adam Ryan Chang is the executive director of Oasis. He believes that homosexual audacity is his superpower. And he's also framed his work with the nonprofit as part of a broader left-wing campaign of liberating the LGBTQ plus community. He's also highlighted the work of his group in apparently representing migrants with a sexually transmitted disease. I guess it's not just HIV. In 2024, a report said 1 in 6 of new clients is living with HIV, and the rest are all at significant risk of contacting HIV. That's what happens when you're having unprotected sex with strangers at bus stops. In 2025, that portion increased to 1 in 5. In response to a request for comment, Chang said people living with HIV are not barred from entering the United States on that basis. Maybe they should be. For Oasis, the public health implications are apparently not a cause for concern. It's all part of reducing stigma and ensuring that immigration justice prevails. So yeah, Gavin Newsom, yeah, Fauci definitely did plenty of experiments on young black orphans in New York with AIDS, infected them with AIDS. Thank you to Sean Joe for the 2 cookies. Appreciate it. All right. I'd also like to talk briefly about L.A. mayoral candidate Spencer Pratt. Spencer Pratt, of course, came to prominence after his home was one of many that burned down in Pacific Palisades. Of course, people might remember him because he was a reality show star on MTV. I don't know the name of the show, but he's been around for many years. And now he's running for mayor. Because he's fed up with Karen Bass and the obstruction that California state and local government have been putting up, stopping people like him from rebuilding their homes. So he appeared with Adam Carolla and was talking about the homeless industrial complex and how they have something called medical street teams that seem to fuel the problem. He said, if you fund public safety and quality of life, guess who loses billions of dollars? Well, of course, the NGOs. The NGOs that give the kickbacks. They get these people elected, and then they come up with fancy names. The billions aren't missing. They're spent, and how they spend them is to increase the problem. Very similar to what's going on, or what was going on, with the SPLC. I was talking to this law enforcement guy that was in this community event. He said yesterday, crazed dude pooping everywhere on the street in front of kids at school. And they got him under, and they got to get him under control. And then one of the health people comes and they say, would you like a pipe or a needle? And law enforcement goes, excuse me? And he's like, yes, we can give them a pipe or a needle. He's like, what? What is this? What are you talking about? These are the medical street teams that NITHA and BASS give them pipes and needles. It's insane. Of course, they want these people to remain homeless because then the homeless industrial complex pipeline remains in place and the money keeps flowing. And if people don't get sober, they never get off the streets, they remain homeless and the checks keep flowing. The reality is every one of these people is breaking the law. You cannot live on the street. You cannot do drugs on the street. You cannot be naked on the street. And people go, well, what are you going to do, Spencer? Where are you going to put these people? Well, first of all, most of these people are not from California. They've been bussed in by body brokers because it's such a big business. These people make so much money. Once you shut down the business, you go in and unplug all of these NGOs, they're going to go to Seattle, or they're going to go out and they're going to grab all these people and they're going to put them in buses themselves because they are merely products, because that's how they're going to make their money. So they'll take them to some other Democrat-run area where these people are, again, being used to produce income. So yes, homelessness has different boxes. Obviously sad stories. People miss a rent here, miss a rent there. You got to help those people and get them housing. We've got housing for these people. People that are fentanyl addicts, well, they need more fentanyl. People that are meth addicts, they need more meth. So you could give them the Four Seasons right now, Master Suite, and they simply don't care. They'd rather hang out on the sidewalks until they sober up, and then they get more fentanyl. So these people need mandatory medical treatment. We need to bring asylums back. We need to have places that treat people for mental health conditions, not just say that we need more affordable housing. We need more beds. So I think that Spencer is right in line with exactly what needs to happen. Now, although there have been major problems with people getting their houses rebuilt, apparently some movement has begun very recently because President Trump once again has gotten involved and demanded that California allow people to rebuild. You've still got thousands of people from the Pacific Palisades fire that have got nowhere to live. They are now, however, finally getting their permits to rebuild. But it shouldn't have taken this long. I mean, President Trump already visited California and told Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass bothly that they should get these people on track and allow them to start building. So President Trump, God, how long ago was this? This is over a year ago. And a lot of these people have been living in tents. They've been living in trailers on their property. Some of them still can't even get back to their property. But President Trump just signed an executive order to fast track the rebuilding of Los Angeles so that these 2,000 permits can get approved. And that was signed back in January. And now finally those permits are going out. So the order lets state and local rules be preempted when it came to obtaining permits and allowing builders to self-certify that they have complied with substantive health, safety, and building standards. So the result is the administration had to take over and do the approval of these thousands of permits so then people could get going and build their homes and, you know, begin the act of living again. President Trump's executive order was a bold move to break through the non-federal logjam that had held up lives, homes, and entire neighborhoods from being rebuilt. Since the executive order, we have helped nearly 2,000 permit approvals into overdrive. Los Angeles County has issued 971 permits since the signing of the order. That's a 72% increase. Los Angeles City has issued 961 permits. That's a 58% increase. And of course, Lee Zeldin at the the Environmental Protection Agency said that they're carrying out the order as the EPA has cleaned up all of the hazardous materials that was left in the wake of that deadly blaze. So there is quite literally no reason for these people not to be getting back into their homes. Now we're going to transition from California, and we're going to talk about Michigan. And that conversation about Michigan is going to lead us directly into the Southern Poverty Law Center. Now, apparently, a political conservative from the state of Michigan, a woman by the name of Aurora Henze, Dr. Aurora, as she's known, she was a journalist, a health journalist working in politics back in 2017. And because she spoke up and said something conservative, she was essentially taken down by a corporate cartel and a number of powerful Democrats in the state. It all, I guess, got really bad in January this year. Charges were actually filed against a Democrat treasurer. I believe we spoke about it at that time. Her name is Tracy Kornak. Tracy was accused of embezzling and abusing a vulnerable adult. Now, Cornack was on the radar for a long time. However, she was really good friends, personal friends, with the current Michigan Attorney General, Dana Nessel. Dana Nessel was actually protecting her from being indicted. Now, Dr. Arora said, I was waiting for this moment. They are not the only ones that can play the long game. I knew that it would take time for the remnants of the Biden regime to come crumbling down, and now it's my turn to tear down the wall. So Dr. Arora was asked about her reactions to this, and of course, what happened? How was she targeted? Well, she said, I was a conservative. I had voted for Trump, but I worked amicably with both political parties up until the 2018 elections. Now, she is also a health author, and she's been cited in the National Library of Medicine. But she said, before I was disenfranchised, I was considered one of the most networked individuals in Michigan. I valued that people trusted me, and for me, that meant safety. As a Christian, I considered it an honor and a duty to serve, but I learned that hard lesson that no matter what level of society you're working at, not everybody shares the same values. Now, what was she doing? How was she targeted? Initially, she was threatened that she was going to be framed for a drug crime on Mother's Day in 2017. We don't know the specific details, who, what, when, where, or why, but then in 2018, it actually happened exactly the same way that she had been warned that she was going to be framed. She said, I didn't take the threat serious because I was a naturopath doctor and I hadn't even taken Tylenol for over 20 years. I imagined that to do what they planned to do would be impossible and that there was no way anybody would believe them. But I was wrong. I was painfully wrong. So her mother died on Easter in 2018, and while she was in a state of grief and mourning, CPS showed up, they drug tested her, and they gave her son to her violent ex-husband who had previously lost custody over domestic violence. And she soon found out that her husband was actually cooperating with this cartel that involved CPS. She said, I had a lot to lose. My father was suffering from dementia. Now my mom was gone. It left our family a vulnerable target. And here we were. I had lived most of my life with my ex-husband threatening me about stealing my family's estate. Finally, the plan was enacted against me, and that moment arrived. As of 2026, I have more than 10 family members that have been targeted and or compromised, and more than $15 million embezzled. And these individuals have had complete control of my medically incapacitated father for the last 3 years. This is what their long-term plan looks like. Someone was watching and waiting, she said, and it became obvious that she had been set up in her 2013 divorce by her ex-husband's now disbarred attorney. She was also one of many victims of this cartel. She said they function like a pretty well-oiled machine and they have a predictable pattern of behavior. This is a group of individuals who act with total impunity. They hide behind titles and corporations, locating and tracking families of high net worth, gathering intel for blackmail, resorting to entrapment and espionage so they can boost their odds, and then launching the attack when a family experiences trauma or upheaval. So they implement these protocols with foot people in the community, both creating and infiltrating business groups like BNI and the Chamber of Commerce. And they use these individuals as investors in their shill companies to wash their money and then lure new victims. They also make sure every attorney is either on board or unethically complacent. So, of course, you've also got corrupt judges and public servants who are taking bribes and working for their network, makes it successful and essentially untouchable. And, of course, with the use of technology, insurance statistics, with programs that easily allow for the sharing of information, it's streamlined, effective, and efficient. But why Democrats, the question is? Why make this a partisan issue? And she said, you just got to follow the trail. It's easy to identify the politicians that are looking the other way, that are calling the shots and benefiting from these criminal endeavors. For me, I was railroaded in my divorce, and I ended up ironically being the neighbor of a chief judge, somebody who was a staunch Democrat. She made it clear from the beginning she never liked me, though my children actually babysat for her grandchildren, and I was friends with her daughter. And I found it strange that she was seen in public with my ex-husband having a conversation in 2014, but for 4 years, she never even looked at me or said hi. And then In 2016, I brought her daughter to a Republican nomination dinner, and apparently the judge was livid. Shortly after, it was disclosed to me that she had launched a campaign against the family of her husband's former law partner that died, and she had successfully intercepted the entire inheritance from the family. I also found out that the 3 children I was warned about in 2017 happened to be the 3 kids I had referred to the judge as babysitters. 2 of those children came forward and told me that they were pressured to lie about me, and they refused. The child that did comply was rewarded with a lucrative high-security job that she was not trained for. However, the other 2 were subsequently targeted and arrested shortly after, twice each. And that was just the Democrat judge that was her neighbor, because my case is directly connected to Dana Nessel, also Senator Mallory McMorrow, and the governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer. I knew Nessel was involved because I worked on her campaign for elder abuse reform and marijuana coverage for the VA. And when she won the election, I brought this crime to her, but she refused to act and she did nothing. And here I am 9 years later, more than 20 complaints later, and she's failed to act and investigate even the lowest hanging of these criminal fruits. She will not stop them from selling all of our property or saving my father's life. In fact, she's refused to enact the elder abuse laws that she created to stop this criminal enterprise. That in and of itself is collusive. But more than that, when I attempted to go above Dana Nessel and send a complaint about her with 2,000 pages of evidence to the DOJ in 2022, I was followed and all of my documents were stolen from me and the police refused to investigate. I've been falsely arrested. I've been framed as mentally ill, disenfranchised, illegally surveilled, illegally searched and seized, hacked, physically assaulted, denied basic due process and constitutional rights for 9 years now. My Democrat Senator Mallory McMorrow has also ignored all of my pleas for help as well. And every single attorney in Michigan refused to take my case. They all told me in one voice, my only option as an American citizen was to leave the country. Absolutely insane. So I go through this entire story to exemplify for you guys just how corrupt these people are in Michigan. I also believe that this is not unusual, okay? Like, Michigan is probably not the only place where something like this is happening. Anytime you've got people with designs to steal, to take advantage of people, to destroy people, unfortunately, there are those out there with the network to make it happen. But to tell a woman that she has to leave her country because they're going to destroy her, that's absolutely insane. And it also just goes to show you that there are not many lawyers out there that you can trust. So it was asked of Aurora if she thinks that her case is so hopeless and if she's considering the attorney's advice and just leaving the country. She states that she does have citizenship in another country, and that was always an option. But giving up on her father, who has cancer and who's also not in her care, who's being tortured, robbed, and isolated for the last 3 years, is not an option. My first name is Mishan. My father named me after the state of Michigan. I also have 4 honorable Catholic priests in my family, one of whom was also a victim. I will honor my namesake and my country against these treasonous actions, which are a threat to every citizen of the United States. If it can happen to me, it can happen to anyone. At this point, President Trump needs to come to Michigan to drain the swamp, and if he won't, I will, but I sure would appreciate the help. All right, so I hope that somebody can get this to the current Department of Justice, because it directly involves that same cabal of female Democrat politicos that are currently running the state where this situation was allowed to take place, to fester, and to continue for 9 years. So how is Jocelyn Benson doing? She's got to be very, very nervous because she didn't just used to work at the SPLC. She was on the SPLC's board when the founder of the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville was paid by the SPLC. So, according to the Department of Justice and that grand jury indictment from the Middle District of Alabama, 11 counts against the SPLC. This organization, so-called anti-hate organization, is accused of running a massive fraud operation by essentially bringing in hundreds of millions of dollars because they were actually funding the efforts of the extremist groups, in quotations, that they were working to fight against. Now, the organization is charged with 6 counts of wire fraud, 4 counts of false statements to a federally insured bank, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit concealment of money laundering. But the organization itself is not who actually committed those crimes. Those crimes would have been committed by people who were working at the SPLC. And prosecutors are looking at the period of time between 2014 and 2023. During that time, the SPLC funneled more than $3 million in donated funds to individuals who are tied with these so-called extremist groups, the KKK, the Aryan Nations, the National Socialist Party, and then another neo-Nazi and a few other white supremacist groups. So this is why Jocelyn Benson has got to be freaking out right now, because you can't run an organization like this and not have some knowledge about what it is that they are doing. And of course, there are a number of other people who are directly connected to the SPLC, and we'll definitely talk about them as well. But if you don't remember, the Unite the Right rally was August 12th of 2017. And it was billed at the time as a call for Americans to come together and defend against the destruction of historic statues by the Obama regime. Now, the Unite the Right rally ended up resulting in the death of a young woman by the name of Heather Heyer. She was a counter-protester. She was allegedly standing against the so-called hateful protesters who were fighting to stop the destruction of historic statues in America. And she was driven over by the young man, James, I can't remember his name. That whole situation is, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But Jocelyn Benson was on the board of the SPLC in 2017 at the time of that rally. And we can see that right here from the SPLC's own information. So Brian Fair was the chair. Jocelyn Benson sat on the board right here. J. Richard Cohen was the president and CEO. In 2018, Jocelyn Benson was then elected as the Secretary of State after she lost her first bid in 2014. That first bid was funded by George Soros. Now, prior to that 2018 election, Benson's online profile actually appears to be scrubbed. They removed any evidence of her ties to the SPLC, which is quite interesting because the SPLC has been a Democratic darling of the left for decades. And I'm sure y'all remember in 2020, she oversaw one of the most fraudulent elections in the country. And of course, she told everybody that it was the safest and securest election in the history of our nation. She has repeatedly lied about so-called armed protesters showing up in front of her home in 2020. The Detroit police have actually commented on this. They said that there was no evidence that any protesters showed up carrying weapons. She likes to talk about the threat of violence in our elections. Her language is very similar to the language of the Southern Poverty Law Center. That shouldn't surprise you, considering the fact that she actually worked there. But again, she's never provided any evidence or support for her claims that violence is being committed because people think that our elections are fake. And at one time, she was caught red-handed lying to a radio host, Frank Beckman. He's no longer alive. She was doing an interview about the windows that were covered up at the election center in Detroit. Remember, they put pizza boxes over the windows to stop GOP poll challengers from watching the counting of absentee ballots. Here, let's go ahead and listen to what Jocelyn Benson said about that incident. I'm sure if you've been here since before 2020, you remember us talking about this.
It's clear that both sides were going to...
I got to turn this up because it's very quiet.
It's clear that both sides were going to complain about the entire process. What did you make of what happened? What are you hearing from TCF Center yesterday, where poll watchers, many of them Republicans who said, look, this was aimed at us, said we were not allowed to look in, and they even put paper over the windows to keep us from looking in at the ballots to double check them as we're allowed to do. What did you make of all that?
Yeah, well, the paper over the windows was because the windows were being broken by those who were outside, and so it was really just protective measures that the Detroit police were implementing. The other piece of it is, I think, I've said this quite clearly throughout, we welcome transparency. I think that's so important, observation on the process, and that's why we had really a record number of poll watchers and challengers throughout the state, including in the absentee counting boards. But it does cross the line when people get disruptive or try to interfere or stop the count.
Nobody was trying to interfere or stop the count except for the people that were attempting to stop the poll watchers from coming in and verifying the count. It's very, very different. You know, there are laws that are in place in Michigan, but Jocelyn Benson and her team of Democrat election thieves saw that those laws were not followed. If mastering the art of lying is a prerequisite for being an employee at the Southern Poverty Law Center, Jocelyn Benson, it's no wonder she got the job. Now, you also remember Charlottesville is where the Fine People hoax was created. This is when President Trump gave a press conference after this horrific death of this young woman, after she was run over, and he condemned the violence, and he said that there were very fine people on both sides, okay? There were good people on the left, there were good people on the right. But of course, they took President Trump's statement and they isolated it, and then they used it to claim that he was praising the neo-Nazis. Obviously, that's not what he was doing. He was merely praising the protesters that were peacefully assembling to demand that historic statues would not be torn down. But the very fine people hoax stuck, even up until the debates with Kamala Harris, where she repeated it again. Joe Biden, when he ran for president in 2016, he was asked, why did you decide to run? And he said it was because of President Trump's statement after the Unite the Right rally. Now, this was known to have been a narrative that was pushed by the Southern Poverty Law Center. You have to ask yourself, did Joe Biden know that the Southern Poverty Law Center had actually funded the Unite the Right rally? That they had actually created the situation that led to the death of this young woman? I don't know, but here, let's take a listen to President Trump's statement and Joe Biden's response.
You had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay? And the press has treated them absolutely unfairly. You had people, and I'm
very different from the narrative. I can't tell you how many times over the years I have had to debunk this to people that I thought were intelligent. There's a lot of stupid people out there, and one of the toughest lessons I've had to learn over the years is that you can never assume someone's level of intelligence.
I ran for president in 2020 because of what I saw in Charlottesville in August of 2017. Extremists coming out of the woods, carrying torches, their veins bulging from their necks, carrying Nazi swastikas, and chanting the same exact anti-Semitic bile that was heard in Germany in the early 30s. Neo-Nazis, white supremacists, the Ku Klux Klan, so emboldened by a president then in the White House that they saw as an ally.
The truth is that they were so emboldened, each and every one of those groups that Joe Biden just mentioned, they were so emboldened by the money they were receiving from the Southern Poverty Law Center that's why they showed up. And of course, Kamala Harris did it again in the 2024 election.
Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side.
I love President Trump's face there because he's just absolutely had enough of these people. Many on the left repeated this claim over and over again, even though it was debunked by Snopes, the biggest fake news factory on the internet. Ilhan Omar used it, and she said that white men were the most dangerous people in America. Listen.
A lot of conservatives in particular would say that the rise in Islamophobia is a result not of hate, but of fear, a legitimate fear, they say, of quote-unquote jihadist terrorism, whether it's Fort Hood or San Bernardino or the recent truck attack in New York. What do you say to them?
Gary, this isn't politics, though. It's propaganda, and that's the difference.
I would say our country should be more fearful of white men across our country, because they are actually causing most of the deaths within this country. And so if fear was the driving force of policies to keep America safe, Americans safe inside of this country, we should be profiling, monitoring, and creating policies to fight the radicalization of white men.
So fucking ridiculous. Now, obviously, yesterday we spoke about this just a little bit. One of the reasons that you're going to see a preponderance of crimes committed by so-called whites in America is because you have people of races that are not whites that are categorized as white when they're booked into prison. So we don't know specifically how Jocelyn Benson got elected, other than to say likely she was cheated in the same way that many of those people in Michigan have been elected. She is attempting now to run for governor. And I think it's important to draw the parallels between the statements she's made, her career, and of course her time at the SPLC. Because if people understand that Jocelyn Benson is indistinguishable from the same people who paid for the events of the Unite the Right rally and also funded the KKK and the modern neo-Nazi groups here in America, then I think that perhaps they might have a problem with her. But I think even more than that, Jocelyn Benson may have a bit of a legal problem on her hands. Jocelyn Benson may have been involved in the transfer of that money to those groups at that time. If you'll remember, the SPLC previously had like this hate index that they used to publish online, and they would quite literally just put people on the right, podcasters, journalists, talking heads. I mean, anybody who didn't agree with them politically, they would end up on their hate index. And it was only recently taken down after the FBI essentially ended their working relationship with them. The SPLC also stopped their practice of paying for these groups while the Biden administration was in power. Of course, the ruling party had already taken over. There was no need to create these constant psychological operations to convince people that white supremacy was the most dangerous thing in America. Quite literally, the most dangerous thing in America at that time was the ruling party. Now, I'd also like to show you what's happened to Jason Kessler since he was paid by the SPLC to organize the Unite the Right rally. Here he is right here. This is him back in 2016, 2017, when he was identified as an American neo-Nazi, white supremacist, and anti-Semitic conspiracy theorist. Kessler organized the Unite the Right rally held in Charlottesville. And you can see here he's wearing an American flag shirt. He's got a Make America Great Again hat on. But today, Jason Kessler, or at one time, Jason Kessler was a journalist for CNN. And you can see right here, he's covering Occupy Wall Street back in 2012. Here he is in 2011, again, covering Occupy Wall Street. So Jason Kessler was already well acquainted with the left-wing propaganda machine. And I don't think it's a coincidence that he went from working for a left-wing organization to being funded by a left-wing organization to found one of the biggest psychological operations in the modern age, which, of course, was used time and time again to try to discredit President Trump. So let me tell you also a little bit more about the founding of the Southern Poverty Law Center. Actually covered this back in 2019 when the news came out. So yesterday, we mentioned that Morris Dees was one of the founders of the Southern Poverty Law Center, and he led this organization right up until spring of 2019. In spring of 2019, he was fired because he had committed some acts of misconduct. He was apparently fond of playing a little bit of grab ass at work. And the nonprofit announced in March of 2019 that he had been pushed out. They said, without mentioning the specific reasons for his firing, that although he has made unparalleled contributions to our work, no one's contributions can excuse this person's inappropriate conduct. Now, certain people have come forward. They've talked about it. An interesting thing about the Southern Poverty Law Center is that although they fight allegedly for the rights of people of color, of Jews, of gays, whatever it might be, whoever is marginalized at the time, they are predominantly run by white people. And, of course, throughout the years, they have been subject to many different claims of mistreatment of women and of those same people of color that they ostensibly claim to support. Again, while at the same time funding neo-Nazis and the KKK. Morris Dees was 82 back when he was kicked out the door. There were a number of people working at the Southern Poverty Law Center who, following his firing, had demanded reforms. They said that they wanted black people to lead them. There was about 24 employees who came forward prior to Morris Dees being fired, demanding that he be gotten rid of. And they said that there were internal allegations of mistreatment, sexual harassment, gender discrimination, racism, and all of it threatening the moral authority of the organization, our integrity along with it. How ironic that they were worried about their integrity and their moral authority in 2019, while at the same time, most likely the leadership of the SPLC was funding all of these extremist organizations and then using those extremist organizations to fundraise millions upon millions of dollars. Now, the president of the SPLC at that time, Richard Cohen, said that the organization would be hiring outside of their organization immediately. They would be conducting a comprehensive assessment of our internal climate and workplace practices to ensure that our talented staff is working in the environment that they deserve, one where all of our voices are heard and all staff members are respected. So the founding of the Southern Poverty Law Center was in 1971. They initially began by suing members of the Ku Klux Klan, and that resulted in offices being firebombed in 1983. You have to ask yourself if maybe they didn't fund their own firebombing to put themselves on the map and gain some sympathy from the minds of the American people. Now, the Morris Dees himself was the son of a white tenant farmer in Alabama. He was sort of raised in the South as this crusader for civil rights, fighting the Klan. He apparently was also scorned in mainstream legal circles for his showmanship, but also for his prodigious ability to raise money. And he did this throughout his entire time at the Southern Policy Law Center, and it made him a multimillionaire. There was also, of course, many people who claimed that Dees is loathed by white nationalists and far-right groups. But now we come to learn that they were actually pretty chummy with white nationalists and far-right groups. And everything that the SPLC claimed to be doing was only in service of being able to continue doing that. As I said yesterday, it's the Hegelian dialectic of problem, reaction, solution. And then, of course, fundraising off of the back of that. Now, who is donating to the Southern Poverty Law Center? Well, I mentioned George Soros funding the political runs of Jocelyn Benson earlier. Turns out George Soros is also a major donor to the Southern Poverty Law Center. It includes a bunch of other names that are going to be very familiar to you as well, including some big philanthropists like JP Morgan, Tim Cook, who just left Apple. Now I find the timing of Tim Cook leaving Apple interesting because it happened just before we have the reveal of the actual activities of the Southern Poverty Law Center. And of course, George Clooney. They are currently they currently hold nearly $800 million in assets, and they're also still soliciting donations. If a person is considering donating to the Southern Poverty Law Center, they may want to reconsider that, because it's very, very possible in the near future this organization will lose their tax-exempt status entirely, and then all the money that has been handed off to them will no longer be tax deductible for the philanthropists who give it. Now, they took in $106 million in 2024, and in their latest appeal for financial assistance, they say that they have an urgent need for emergency cash. They're going to need a lot of money because they're also going to have to fight their way through the American legal system. The Unite the Right rally was not the first time they took in money, but as I showed you yesterday, after the Unite the Right rally, they were within 1 year able to triple the amount of money that they had in the bank. Just that same year, George Clooney donated $1 million. JP Morgan gave $500,000 for so-called disaster relief. I don't know what they spent that money on. Tim Cook pledged $1 million in the wake of the Unite the Right rally. MGM said that they would match employee donations. Of course, you know, if none of their employees donate, then they don't have to donate anything. But again, all of that money was going to fund these organizations so that they could fundraise off the back of it. Now, the indictment is made possible by the presence of an informant. That informant is at this time unnamed. In the indictment, they're listed as F37. That indictment appears to be that informant appears to be one of these people at one of these extremist organizations that was being funded by the SPLC, because they themselves were paid $270,000 between 2015 and 2023, probably from right around the same time that President Trump announced he was going to be running for president, and then right before he came back into office. Other donors, like I mentioned, George Soros, the Open Society Foundation, they pledged $75,000 in 2016. They put together something called an anti-hate table of national anti-bias Muslim, Arab, and South Asian community organizations. That's available on their website. Chick-fil-A, OpenAI, and the studio that made the Halo video games, they've made small donations over the years. But all told, the SPLC funneled about $3 million to the leaders of these various groups. That not only included the Ku Klux Klan, the United Klans of America, Aryan Nations, the National Socialist Party of American Nazis, and the Sadistic Souls Motorcycle Club, again, between 2014 to 2023. Now, the SPLC, of course, at this time has denied all of the claims in their indictment, and they are going to fight it in court. And they said that they only used these groups as sources of information since the 1980s. They were just gathering intelligence. Well, it would appear that the informant who has come forward has said that they were actually paying for a lot more than just information. So I can't wait to see what happens with the Southern Poverty Law Center. And more importantly, I can't wait to see who gets indicted inside their organization. Because again, there is no possible way that this company did not operate with these business practices, and there were not people who knew. There had to be people whose names and signatures are on the foundation documents for the various fake companies that they set up. There had to be people who were signing the checks that were going out to these organizations. There had to be a paper trail, and the DOJ is currently investigating where that paper trail went right now. Let me say thank you to G. Fontez. He says, I think the DOJ has limited what they're currently charging the SPLC with for transactions made within the state of Alabama, and several reasons it would seem advantageous to do so for now. Well, the indictment is out of Alabama, and I believe that's where the Southern Poverty Law Center is based. So I think that's why they're charging it in that way. But I don't think that they're going to stop with that right there, because the Southern Poverty Law Center is obviously operating all around the country. The fake companies and the bank accounts are like in the Cayman Islands and stuff. So this is going to spread internationally. Thank you very much to Sean Joe for 2 cookies. Thank you to Filter Dog, who says DOJ announces it has arrested a special forces soldier who took part in the raid that captured Maduro after the soldier allegedly pocketed $400,000 by betting more than $30,000 on Maduro's removal on Polymarket. I remember at the time that there was somebody who said, somebody who had betted on the capture of Maduro on Polymarket, and they were trying to figure out who it was. Gannon Ken Van Dyke. Personally, I don't have a problem with him betting on it. SPLC funded Charlottesville Unite the Right. The leader of Unite the Right is Jason Kessler, CNN reporter. It's all connected. Yep. And then Ina says, thanks, RP. Well, thank you, Ina. I appreciate you. All right. So now the question has to become, who was the Southern Poverty Law Center funding? Because they weren't only taking in money, they were also pushing money out. Well, it turns out one of those people is Jon Ossoff. Jon Ossoff, he's a Georgia Democrat senator. He's currently running in the midterms to keep his seat, and he received $185,060 in 2020 from the Southern Poverty Law Center's Political Action Committee, SPLC Action Fund PAC. Democrat Senator Raphael Warnock also received the exact same amount of money in 2020. And you can see here on the SPLC Action Fund's website, they say that they endorse Jon Ossoff for re-election. And that was made just March 25th, so just about a month ago. I wonder if Jon Ossoff is going to ask them to take that down. You can also see from their itemized information here in their financials that they've given money to these 2 Democrat politicians, 2 politicians that, in my estimation, shouldn't even be sitting in their seats right now because they stole their seats in the first place. Allegedly, in my opinion, that's what I believe. All right. Now, real briefly, I have a quick message from my friends over here on a Rumble. Thank you very much, you guys, for tuning in. If you haven't yet hit that like button, I would sincerely appreciate it. Also, if you guys have ever wondered what it feels like to shoot with the same level of precision tech that's used by special forces, I've got good news for you. You now can, because after years of research and development, MCG TAC has just developed something incredible. It's called the Stinger Combat Sight. It's not your average red dot sight. This is using holographic technology. One time, it was only available for elite military and law enforcement, and the Stinger delivers crystal clear precision. It's so accurate, you could hit a dime at 300 yards without even trying. It's the exact same level of technology that's used by the pros. But here's the twist. Most of these sites like this are going to go for about $600 or more, and people are happily going to pay it because they like the quality. But right now, through an exclusive deal with MCG Tactical, you can get this mil-spec sight for under $200. And it gets even better because for my listeners, you're actually going to get 67% off. And they're also going to cover shipping. So all you got to do is scan that QR code that you see on screen, or you can go directly to mcgtac.com/redpill, and you can get yours today. The only catch is that supply is limited. So you got to get them before they fly off the shelves and there is nothing left. So if you want to get a sight that's built for the best, this is your opportunity. Grab it now before they have to shut down orders. Thank you very much to MCG TAC. I really do appreciate it. Also, thank you to the good people over there on Rumble. All right, continuing. Jon Ossoff, I'm sure that he's not going to want that to remain up. Jim Kyle says, always watching, but not always ranting. Ossoff has done bupkis for Georgia. You are absolutely correct. He has been a absolute stinker. All right. Now, I mentioned this at the beginning of the show in regards to the ADL. The SPLC is not the only organization like themselves who has had a habit and a history documented of paying extremist groups to continue operating. putting people inside these groups essentially to make them more extreme, more radical, and give the groups themselves a reason to remain and continue fundraising. And that other group that I'm specifically mentioning here is the ADL. Now, the ADL's history goes all the way back, over 100 years, to a man by the name of Leo Frank. Now, I actually did a baseless conspiracies on this. I did a whole hour and a half, 2 hours on it. But just to summarize, the Southern Poverty Law Center recently, last year, on the 112th anniversary of the Leo Frank trial, they published an article, and the article was incredibly disingenuous. They said in this article, Black, Jewish, divided by hate, stronger together. That was their takeaway from the Leo Frank murder case. But my takeaway from the Leo Frank murder case is that a young girl by the name of Mary Fagan was murdered. She was 13 years old. She was a white child, and she was working at a pencil factory in Atlanta. She was murdered in April of 1913. Now, initially, police suspected a man by the name of Newt Lee. He was a black employee at the factory. He's the guy who discovered the body. But then, after they investigated, they determined that the true murderer of Mary Fagan was Leo Frank. Leo Frank was the manager of the factory. He was also the president of the Atlanta chapter of B'nai B'rith. So Leo Frank was put on trial, and during that trial, the Anti-Defamation League was founded to essentially take the attention away from the truly guilty people and to essentially claim that the prosecution of Leo Frank was an open act of anti-Semitism, really. So the lawyers for Leo Frank tried to inflame anti-black sentiment both nationally and locally. They also tried to frame both the original suspect and then another suspect. Frank's lawyers also basically lied about who he was. They also lied about who Mary Fagan was as well. Now, what's incredible about this is that this, happening 113 years ago, white-black relations, especially in Atlanta, were not super good, right? And you have this man, well-to-do, on trial for the murder of this young girl, and they're doing everything they can to frame two different black men who worked at the factory. And it was a jury that was made up of all white people. And they took a look at the evidence. They went through the trial, and they concluded that, yes, in fact, Leo Frank had killed young Mary Fagan. The testimony of the black witnesses were more credible and convincing than Leo Frank's story and the tale that he told. So Frank was convicted, and he was actually sentenced to death. He was set to be put to death, and the governor of Georgia commuted his sentence and took away the death sentence and gave him life in prison. Leo Frank didn't last very long. After about 8 weeks, because the people of Atlanta were so upset about the brutal murder of this 13-year-old girl, they actually broke into the jail, into the prison, and they extracted Leo Frank. They drove him to Mary Fagan's hometown, and they lynched him. They hung him from a tree, and that's it. So now for the better part of the last century, the Anti-Defamation League, the SPLC, and a number of other organizations that are traditionally, pretty left-wing, they have used the trial of Leo Frank to illustrate the need for organizations like the SPLC and the ADL to fight against so-called extremism, to fight against anti-Semitism. And they have always claimed that Leo Frank was railroaded, that he was unjustly tried and convicted. But I think that that's not true. That's absolutely not true. The evidence to show that Leo Frank was a child murderer, he also raped her. I think it's worth mentioning there. That was an aspect, a component of the crime. So the authors of this article that the SPLC wrote contended that both Frank and Conley were scapegoats and they were victims of a racist system of white supremacy. Never mind the evidence showing that Leo Frank was the guy who killed this little girl. But they want to draw these comparisons like, oh, you know, we got to bring together these disparate parts of the community. We got a Jewish guy who was railroaded, and we got a black guy who was railroaded. But if we can all just come together against the white supremacists because the jury was white, the jury must have hated blacks and Jews. So if that were the case, then why didn't they go after the black guy for the murder? Because he didn't do it. That's the short answer right there. So anyways, the one thing that they don't mention in the article is the victim of the crime. They never mention young Mary Fagan. Never tell you the real circumstances of the crime, only suggest that Leo Frank was unjustly murdered by a racist white nationalist system, and that if it hadn't been for the murder of Leo Frank by the dangerous white nationalists, they would have went after Mr. Connolly and Mr. Newt as well. So this is just to give you an example of the lies that the SPLC tells, and why I hope with every fiber of my being that the ADL is also on the list of organizations that will be looked at for this. And frankly, I think it's going to be a lot easier for that to happen because the IRS just announced a major revision to their nonprofit Form 990 filings. These new forms that nonprofits will have to fill out require the complete and total disclosure of fiscal sponsorships. This means that the dark money NGO pipeline will no longer be allowed to continue. So these big dark money left-wing groups like the Tides Foundation and Arabella Advisors, Arabella shut down, they turned into something else, but George Soros, all of these different big dark money groups have for decades, the entire time they've been around, exploited these fiscal sponsorships to basically operate in the shadows and make it more difficult for people like us and even, you know, other governments and, you know, public interest organizations to determine exactly where that money is coming from and then where it's flowing out to. So Treasury announces Form 990 Transparency Initiative to expose hidden funding and strengthen oversight. The Department of Treasury today announced the IRS plans to revise Form 990 to improve transparency, strengthen tax administration, and provide clearer reporting on certain activities of tax-exempt organizations described in Section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code. That includes government contracts, government grants, and fiscal sponsorship arrangements. The changes are intended to detect misconduct and hold wrongdoers accountable. Government grants and contracts can involve substantial public funds. Clearer reporting in these areas can help the IRS and the public better understand the sources and uses of that funding, support proper revenue classification, reduce the risk of fraud, abuse, and the misuse of taxpayer dollars. So that is a really good thing. And I'm sorry, but I just don't think that it's a coincidence that it's coming out at the same time we have just learned about one of the largest scandals surrounding a major nonprofit organization in the United States of America. Now, let's transition to a different type of fraud. This is going to be in Minnesota. Ilhan Omar, as we've learned recently, was forced to refile her financial disclosures. She and her husband disbanded their fake winery that for a period of time was worth around $6 million. Then it became worth nothing once people started looking. But Ilhan Omar is currently under investigation by Minnesota lawmakers. And that's because she was directly tied to the $250 million Feeding Our Future fraud scheme. Now, she was recently requested to come in and give testimony during these legislative hearings investigating Feeding Our Future and all of the fraud in Minnesota. The bitch just didn't show up. Absolutely no care, believes that she is better than the investigators who are trying to figure out what's going on with the fraud. So now they are just going to investigate her.
Them. Financial disclosures had said the estate of Omar and her husband, Tim Minette, jumped from being in debt to somewhere between $6 million and $30 million in 2024. They amended their financial disclosure and released it to show the estate is really somewhere between $18,000 and $95,000. They blame the discrepancy as much as $29 million on an accountant who did not subtract the liabilities of Minette's businesses. And this is the same congresswoman who championed the Meals Act. That was the COVID relief program intended to provide food for poor kids suffering during the pandemic. Republicans say that created the pathway for the Feeding Our Future scandal, a $250 million boondoggle of meals billed but never provided. A restaurant at the center of the scandal was a safari restaurant. Omar held campaign events there. One of the owners, Salem Ahmed Saeed, was convicted for his role in the scandal. The Republican chair of the House Fraud Committee made repeated requests for Omar to show up. No response from Omar.
It's just another example of disrespecting.
Disrespect, because Ilhan Omar believes that she is above the law. Well, you know what? Something tells me she's about to find out.
See, as you can see, the more you around, the more you're going to find out.
Yeah, and find out she will. All right, now, I'd also like to show you the reaction from a pure sociopath. One of the most telltale signs of a sociopath is a conspicuous lack of empathy. Keith Ellison was speaking at a Minnesota event, and he was being addressed by a member of the crowd who was traumatized by their experience with ICE. Now, I could care less personally, but it's not because I lack empathy. It's because I think these people are ridiculous. Keith Ellison is supposed to be one of the allies of the left-wing contingent of Minnesota. But as he is listening, as he's supposed to be listening to this member of the audience, he's scrolling on his phone. And it gets so bad that somebody comes out from behind the stage to tell him it's a bad look. And he still can't help himself.
And thank God I made it to that street. There were many of our community members just leaving work from the state hospital, which was right up there. They were able to be there and see what was happening. I was scared because of the ICE agents have been operating without impunity. Nobody is stopping them from what they are doing.
So she clearly just told him, that's a bad look, dude. Like, this is your constituent talking about the trauma she experienced because ICE is so mean. You better listen. And then she starts crying, and he picks it up again.
Well, I did make it to that street. As soon as I turned onto it, an ICE agent maneuvered around me and slammed on its brakes in front of me. And
he just can't help himself. He is such a piece of shit. Does not care at all. It's all transactional for Keith Ellison and people like Ilhan Omar. All right, now remaining with the theme of fraud, because it's all part of the Cloward-Piven strategy. Dr. Oz has just sent a letter to a number of governors nationwide, I believe all of the governors nationwide, demanding action on Medicaid fraud. And they've now got 10 days to respond, or the feds are going to step in. Let's take a look. This letter is to the governor of Alabama. Dear Governor Ivey, I write to request that your Medicaid program undertake a swift reevaluation of Medicaid providers of services at high risk of waste, fraud, and abuse and corruption as part of the state's program integrity obligations under federal law. At the same time, your Medicaid leaders are being asked to provide a broader strategy on provider validations within 30 days. You should not, however, view that strategy as a substitute for a swift review and revalidation of high-risk providers. We are requesting that you notify us of whether you intend to carry out such a swift revalidation along with the proposed timetable within 10 business days of the receipt of this letter. Please be advised, failure to do so will be considered as we evaluate the likelihood of fraud in each state moving forward. Corrupt individuals and organizations masquerading as healthcare providers are defrauding Medicaid and American taxpayers of billions of dollars each year, placing valuable resources out of reach for those the program was intended to serve, those being low-income senior citizens, children, and disabled individuals. Classes of providers with less rigorous enrollment and billing requirements, providers without national provider identifiers, are most vulnerable to fraud, representing an opportunity to scope quick and decisive action towards areas of highest risk. It's urgent that action be taken immediately to address the rapid increase in fraud, waste, and abuse and corruption in Medicaid and to bar fraudulent actors from further abuse of the program. While the factors contributing to fraud are multifaceted and require a comprehensive approach to address, a revalidation process for high-risk providers will immediately deter criminal actors from continuing their fraud schemes as the federal and state governments closely review and scrutinize the qualifications of providers to suspend or terminate clearly abusive actors from the program. States have the ability to designate which providers are high risk. However, CMS expects that your definition include any provider without a national provider identifier. That is a huge class. My agency stands ready to provide any necessary technical assistance. Ensuring that taxpayer funding is used in the Medicaid program to benefit only Americans most vulnerable will require a coordinated effort by state and federal governments to put an end to brazen fraud schemes that steal taxpayer dollars from programs intended to help the most vulnerable Americans. I look forward to partnering with you to fight the war on fraud, and together we can make Medicaid stronger and more effective for millions of Americans that it serves. And then he sends a letter as well to the state Medicaid director, both going to the governor and then the position of the person who is supposed to address this at the next rung down the ladder. So they are, again, suggesting that if they are going to start a plan, which they are required to by law, they've got to be able to present it within the next 10 days. And if they don't, then they run the risk of losing all of their federal funding in the same way that California has, in the same way that New York has when it comes to the Department of Transportation. And we are now going to move from fraud in the Medicaid program into the disgusting activities of members of Congress, beginning with Ruben Gallego. Ruben Gallego, now the former best friend of Eric Swalwell, has just had a number of women come forward. In fact, Representative Anna Paulina Luna says, I have now heard from 4 women who have had multiple and uncomfortable, inappropriate advances, comments, touching, etc. from Senator Gallego. This is not made up, and the Senate is being awfully quiet about it. Well, what happened was Gallego took a trip to Bogota last summer. He would stay out into the wee hours of the morning, partying at a club, and he asked multiple embassy staffers to join him. Despite warnings from the U.S. Embassy in Colombia, they had identified a credible threat to his life. Gallego went with Republican Senator Bernie Moreno on a congressional delegation to Colombia, and what Gallego's office said was an effort to strengthen bilateral relations as well as discuss organized crime, business climate, and China's growing influence in the country. If I had to guess, Gallego staying out late at Colombian nightclubs, he's obviously drinking, probably doing some of that good Colombian yay as well. His behavior during the trip raised the concern among several U.S. officials. At the conclusion of the August trip, embassy staff received what they believed to be a credible report that there was a threat on his life. They notified Gallego's security detail and sent additional security to discuss the matter. The Arizona Democrat was at dinner at the time, and after some discussion, said, you know what, I'm cool. I'm going to stay out. 3 sources have told this publication Notice, and following dinner, Gallego just walked to a nightclub. While he was at dinner in the club, Gallego and his chief of staff messaged employees at the embassy to come meet them. 1 U.S. official, a former U.S. official, and 3 other sources briefed on the matter told the publication. At least 1 female embassy staffer was said that she received a message from Gallego asking her to come out. It's unclear if any employees did go out with him, and there are no allegations at this time that Gallego engaged in inappropriate behavior with any of those staffers. But a source close to Gallego said the 2 men were simply trying to get together at the conclusion of the event. Gallego eventually left the club and made it back home to the hotel around 3 a.m. Later that morning, when a bus was scheduled to take Gallego and others to the airport, his chief of staff had to get a key to his room to get him and take him to the bus. He was so hung over. The source close to Gallego said that it's standard procedure for the chief of staff to conduct a wake-up call, which involves knocking on his door and retrieving him. The U.S. Department of State does not confirm or deny the existence of any internal investigations. In a statement, a spokesperson for Gallego said the senator had coordinated closely with embassy security. While at dinner at the conclusion of a successful congressional delegation trip, the senator and his chief of staff invited embassy staff to join them, which is a common way to recognize the work of those who support these visits. As one of the first Colombian-American senators elected to Congress, Gallego was proud of his work done in Colombia and looks forward to continuing to strengthen those efforts as the ties between the United States and Colombia continue to be addressed. His behavior in Congress is, however, under scrutiny. We know that Swalwell is accused by multiple women. We know that we've had a number of rumors about Gallego engaging in the same inappropriate behavior. We saw that press conference where Gallego appeared to be very nervous about the entire thing. And, of course, as Anna Paulina Luna said, women are beginning to come forward. Now, I'd also like to tell you about the arrest of a Louisiana mayor. This is coming from the Louisiana Bureau of Investigation. The mayor of Winnsboro, Alice Wallace, has just been arrested on 6 counts of Medicaid fraud for stealing over $75,000 in benefits. The mayor of Winnsboro was arrested by Attorney General Liz Murrell's Louisiana Bureau of Investigation for Medicaid fraud after this $75,000 scheme was discovered. Based on a referral for the investigation by the Louisiana Department of Health, the LBI special agents investigated the allegations of government benefits fraud by 50-year-old Alice Wallace of Robinson Drive in the town of Winnsboro in Franklin Parish. And they found that Wallace did, in fact, fraudulently receive Medicaid benefits for herself and a dependent between 2021 and 2026. She did not report to LDH a change in household income. She failed to disclose her marital status, and she intentionally misrepresented the availability of health insurance provided through her employers. Agents found that Wallace failed to notify LDH that she was employed from 2021 to 2022, where she received a salary. She was also offered health insurance coverage. From 2022 to 2026, she was employed by the town of Winnsboro, Louisiana, as the elected mayor, and she did not report to LDH that employment, income, or availability of medical health coverage as required. She was the freaking mayor, and she was still sucking off Lady Liberty's teeth. Absolutely insane. So she and her dependent continuously utilized Medicaid programs from 2021 to 2026. That was while she was receiving a nice salary. The total of the benefits equaled $75,000. The 6 counts of government benefits fraud have been levied against her in the 19th Judicial District Court of Louisiana. She was arrested for knowingly concealing and failing to disclose material facts affecting her and her dependents' continued eligibility to receive benefits from the Louisiana Department of Health and Medicaid program. Those 6 counts, if they are found to be guilty, shucks, it doesn't tell us how much. Anyways, those 6 counts are all between those 5 years, and it looks to me like she's not going to have any other choice but to plead guilty, because that's exactly what she did. All right. Also coming out of Washington, D.C., U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro has just announced the charging of a Chinese scam being run out of Burma.
We are driving a coordinated campaign to disrupt as well as impose consequences on the transnational criminal organizations that run and are behind these schemes. Today, we announced significant milestones in that fight. We have charged Chinese bosses who ran a scam compound in Burma where thousands were trafficked, enslaved, beaten, and then forced to steal from Americans for years. We have seized also a Telegram channel, and that channel was luring workers into a forced compound in Cambodia. There they were ordered to pose as U.S. banks, as the New York City Police Department, to steal Americans' life savings. We have taken down more than 500 websites. They were used to steal Americans' life savings. My office is going to continue to work to identify the funds stolen. We have also restrained more than $700 million in cryptocurrency from U.S. victims of fraud. The administration of President Trump is lockstep in combating these scams, and we are just getting started.
I hope that money ends up going back to the people that it was stolen from. If it isn't, then obviously that's just going to be added to the balance sheet for the United States government. We also have new information in the investigation of Act Blue. The CEO of Act Blue, Regina Wallace-Jones, has just been subpoenaed to testify before a House committee. And the Committee of House Administration has invited her to testify at a full committee hearing. They've got jurisdiction over federal elections, including federal campaign finance law. As you are aware, the committee has been investigating Act Blue's donor verification policies, which don't exist, and procedures, including the platform's fraud prevention services since October of 2023. The committee is considering potential legislative reforms to address fraudulent and illegal political donations made using online fundraising platforms such as Act Blue. Now, you'll also remember that every other employee of Act Blue that's been called before the committee to testify, they've all pled the fifth. None of them will answer questions. This subpoena is scheduled for July of 2025. They had previously wanted her to come in July of 2025, but they've moved it forward to Tuesday, May 19th. And in preparation for that, they're asking for a bunch of information, and they need it no later than May 14th. Your oral remarks may be limited to 5 minutes, but your written testimony may be as long as you wish. Please be prepared and confirm your attendance no later than April 30th. We also have news about a man who had previously been contracting for the U.S. government, but he had the great idea of going online and publicly calling for the hanging of President Trump, leaving his corpse in front of the White House. His name is Kyle Martin. Put him on blast.
People are saying it's going to happen this weekend and they're buying champagne or whatever, but I want to remind everybody that we need to make sure that they don't bury it. We need to hang it out front of the White House for the birds to pick clean. And then once it's picked clean, we need to bronze it and install it over the entryway to the White House so that the next person who gets in there knows what's coming for them. And if they try to take it down, they can replace it.
So Kyle owns a company called Ghost Mountain Executive Search. He is an Army veteran. He began his career in the Army, served for 3 years in Operation Iraqi Freedom and Enduring Freedom. He's got a bachelor's degree with double majors in economics and finance, spent 5 years in nonprofit finance leadership, leading to interim chief financial officer. And now he recruits with his company, as does contracting for the U.S. government. You can reach Kyle at 469-708-6444. That's a public phone number for Ghost Mountain Executive Search. And I sincerely hope that the federal government stops contracting him as a headhunter, and that his licenses are taken away, and that he is also going to be prosecuted for calling for the death of President Trump. Not only the death of President Trump, but the public display of his corpse. All right, now, really sad story here. Are you guys aware of a man by the name of Daryl Sheets? Daryl Sheets was on Storage Wars, a reality show, and he just was found dead. He committed suicide, but it's not as simple as Daryl Sheets just killing himself. He was 67 years old, and apparently Daryl Sheets was being he was being character assassinated online. You can see here in this post, I believe this is on Facebook, he said, once again, people of Havasu, which is where he lived, I have been hacked by a very evil person, and the posts you are getting from Daryl the Clown Sheets are not done by me. They are being done by a Jim and Allison Thacker in Keyser, Oregon. These are very evil people. Now, I don't know what these posts said because I haven't seen them, but apparently they must have said some of these things here. He says, I'm not gay. I have made no post about anyone's children's, arcade owners, etc. I'm extremely sorry and sick over this. These people have ruined me. And he said that he would. Please understand, it is not me. People are showing up to my work and wanting to harm me. The police are aware of this, but their hands are tied because Facebook allows this, and it's very bad. If something happens to me, it was Jim Thacker and his wife. This is Jim Thacker, and this is his wife. So apparently, Jim and Allison Thacker relentlessly pursued Daryl Sheets to character assassinate him, and they essentially ruined his life through cyberbullying. And Daryl has now committed suicide as a result of the harassment he was receiving online. Here's another post where he says, well, people, here is my cyberbully stalker. Just letting people know if anything happens to me, this is him, inspiring Hummingbird 6116 Jim Thacker, Jennifer McNeary, and hundreds of spoof numbers, Google numbers, a page called Show Me Your Junk, and Daryl the Clown Sheets. He has been going after other small businesses in town and harassing them using my name. It's not me. He has extorted money from many people in this town, acting like a handyman. This has been going on for 3 years with him, and the things he is saying are very damaging. This is a felony called cyberbullying. Now, this is illegal where Daryl Sheets was from, but apparently the police never did anything about it. And now the man is dead. It's a really, really sad situation. And, there's a lot of people who think that just talking shit to people online is no big deal. There's a fine line between, saying things online and seeking to destroy a person's life online. And I bring this up because it's actually kind of similar to what happened with David Wilcock. David Wilcock was also being cyberbullied and relentlessly pursued online. He had his own problems already in his life. Came to find out that David was about, somewhere close to $5 million in debt to the IRS for back taxes. That'll destroy anybody's mental state. But he had also gotten divorced in the last couple of years. He was also dealing with people like this. So, another star from from Storage Wars, Renee Nazoda, believes that cyberbullying might have played a part in the tragic suicide of Daryl Sheets. He had this guy really, really tormenting him lately and cyberbullying him. Daryl has been posting a lot about the guy that's been cyberbullying and tormenting him, and I really hope law enforcement look into that guy and it's not just a pass. Sergeant Kyle Ridgway, the public information officer for Lake Havasu City Police Department in Arizona, said, we are aware of these cyberbullying accusations, and that is part of an active criminal investigation. So that is Renee Nazoda right there, speaking out about his friend committing suicide. Guys, just because you watch us on television doesn't mean you know us. It doesn't mean you know what we're about. He said in his message to fans that nothing entitles someone to bully someone else. As a matter of fact, if you have somebody in your life that thinks it's funny to cyberbully other people, slap them in the back of the head. Make them become a better human being, because you never know what demons somebody faces and what they go through and what might push them over the edge. So, very tragic, and I sincerely hope that the people who were involved in the bullying of this guy end up going to prison. Also, I do have confirmation from the Boulder County Sheriff's Department that David Wilcock was, in fact, the man that they responded to the other day. I've got the media contact information, phone number, and email. So I am going to be requesting through open records requests as much information as they can give. If I'm able to get the body camera footage, I'm sure it will be edited because, of course, nobody needs to see somebody actually killing themselves. But it will likely have enough to show us the state of mind of what David was going through at the time. All right, you guys. Just a final thank you over here. Hey, would you blow me says the biggest scam is that every department in every city must use their budget or they lose it, and the city has justification to raise their property taxes. It's like that throughout the entire freaking country. Once they get that money, they never want to let it go. And then they have to come up with a new reason on why they have to spend more money, why they need to keep your money and keep it coming in. Angie says, wait, was Benson in or running for office during the fake Michigan kidnapping of Whitmer? She was in office at that time. She was not at the SPLC. Since now some people involved were also involved with Charlottesville. Yeah, they were, I'm sure the SPLC covered the fake Whitmer kidnapping, and they probably did it with glee. But no, she was already in her office at that time. Jim Kyle, Ossoff sucks. Yes, we got you there. Okay. Real quick, before we read the final thank yous over on Pilled, you guys, if you still have not yet tried 1775 coffee, I want to give you an opportunity to do so. They got some of those starter kits available where you're going to get their bold dark roast, their smooth medium roast, and their vitality mushroom coffee that gives you clean energy and laser focus without the crash of traditional coffee. It's all made from the highest quality beans you can get, single origin, small batch, toxin and mold free. And of course, you're also going to be getting that gold spoon clip, their very strong frother, and a black 1775 tumbler. It is packed full of $170 worth of coffee and gear, and it's all yours for just $99. This is for all those people watching and wondering if 1775 coffee is worth it. It is. You should try it. And to find out for yourself, you got to go to 1775coffee.com/studio and grab one of those starter kits before they're gone. Bold beans, clean fuel in a morning routine that stands for something just like Rumble does. Thank you so much. Also, thank you to Lewis. I know it's not your birthday anymore, but still happy birthday, brother. And let me see. I got another letter here from Margaret. Thank you, Margaret. Appreciate it. It's just sent from her bank, so there's no letter or anything. But Margaret, thank you very much for the support. I really do appreciate it. Thank you to both you and Lewis. And let me just check rate real quick on Cash App. Also, this is hilarious. I had some e-thought on Twitter come in and say, don't you have other things to do? People without jobs shake my head. Like, bitch, you sell your tits on the internet. Who are you talking to? Okay. Sorry for the language. I've just been waiting all show to say that. Okay. Angela. Oh, my gosh, Angela. Thank you so much. She says, thank you for all you do. Take Lisa out to dinner. I love you, Angela. It was great seeing you. Thank you so much for this. Appreciate it. Really appreciate the support. Okay. Need to say thank you to... Okay, we saw the U.S. Special Forces. Thank you for that. We go to 808Y Digital. 8088Y Digital. Robert Gueva did a pretty good job yesterday on this. The internal emails he read were spicy. Off the Leash, thank you for the can. Brew Bark. The IRS code calls for taxes on corporation, not individual U.S. citizens. 1040 forms are for voluntary contributions, and they are only for non-citizens. If you take a look, they actually say that it's for people coming in, foreigners coming into the country, not for U.S. citizens. So, yes, you are absolutely correct. Like I said, I mean, taxes are not for American citizens. They're for corporations and for foreigners. Filter Dog says, does Robert's friendship with Norm Eisen raise any concerns about the SCOTUS leaker might be? Well, I mean, at this point, I think there's multiple people in SCOTUS that could be the leaker. I don't think it needs to be a Supreme Court justice. I mean, each and every one of those SCOTUSes have their own set of people that are working for them. It's as easy as nothing to have that stuff get leaked out of there because pretty much all lawyers nowadays are sell my tits. Nobody's going to pay to see my tits. I'll tell you what, maybe Lisa, but that's it. The people working inside the Supreme Court, they're all liberals. They're all from DC. They're all lawyers. They're all the same type of deep state trash that we're trying to take down. So, you know, I mean, I don't trust John Roberts. I don't trust several of those SCOTUSes, but they would not be the ones leaking. It would undoubtedly be their aides, the people working in their offices. Then Lucky Patriot 17. Thank you for the phone, sir. He says, thank you for investigating and honoring David Wilcock. He was a good guy. He impacted my life with his lectures, research, and is a good soul. Yeah, it is absolutely horrific that he passed away in the way that he did. And it's really tragic that he died at the time that he did, because this is the moment David's been working towards, that he's been pretty much living for his entire life. So it is horrible. Absolutely horrible. All right, you guys. Thank you for being here. Good luck. God bless. I'll be back tomorrow at 5 p.m. for another episode of Red Pill News Live. In the meantime, don't forget about all of the other sponsors of my program. They are listed in the description of this video, such as my friends over at Oneness Drops, onessdrops.com/promo/BOGO Red Pill 78. Buy one, get one free on everything on their website, available for the rest of the month. All you got to do is just add one thing to your cart. They will automatically give you another one. The same is true of their mullein extract or their soursop extract, the DMSO, all of it. My friends over at mypillow.com, use code RP78, consciousstrength.net, use code RP78. This is my buddy Jordan's website. Of course, Jordan is one of my longtime friends. And of course, rncstore.com. Use the code RP78 to save at least 10% off on all of their B17 Laetrile products. Much, much more. But all the links are in the description below. I will see you guys tomorrow, right here. Peace. Hey, do me a favor and hit that like button if y'all would. I'd really appreciate it.